from you.
Okay.
So yeah, it's really simple, and then we'll just kick it over to dude. How's it going? And we'll jump right in.
Okay.
Pretty easy format. What's happening, everybody? How you guys doing? Everybody in the chat, what's up? What's up? We've got an awesome show tonight. I'm your host, Mikey, and of course, as always, the bro host, Bub.
Hello.
And Sir Bro of Diz returns tonight with Stoner is not the loner tonight in Master Control.
Nope.
Thank you so much to both those guys, making everything look awesome, sound awesome. Thank you to all you folks in the chat. We see Burton, Necro, Dick Meadows. What's up, everybody? We've got a heck of a show. First off, Bub, how you doing? How you feeling?
Great.
Feeling
Beautiful
good?
weather. It's starting to turn around in Ohio.
It
Get this
is,
rain out of
man.
here.
It is really
We're close.
But you know what? It's going to be hot in like a week, and then the spring's going to be over. And then
Yeah,
it's
but
gonna
you
be
know
like
what?
90.
You know what? The AC's working.
Hey, the AC is working in the studio. I kind of had to go a little crazy to make that happen, but
We are appreciative of it. It's nice and cool.
yeah, guys, let's hop right in, right, Bub? Let's do this because
Yeah.
I'm chomping at the bit. Awesome, amazing guest, James A. Willis tonight. Now, James is an author, speaker, and paranormal researcher that has been at it for a very, very long time. 1999, founded a paranormal research organization that we're going to talk about, and also has written and co-authored and authored several books, The Weird Ohio, Weird Indiana.
Oh, yeah.
The Big Book of Ohio Ghost Stories.
If you haven't seen those, check them out.
Yeah, go check out a lot of the links. All of his links are in the description. And then also contributed to, I think, 6 books of Weird US. So without further ado, James, how the heck are you, man?
I'm doing well. I'm happy to be here. I'm digging the vibe of this place. It's pretty cool.
Awesome, man.
He's got a nose for it though, because we were in the control room and he walked in and I was like, oh, Mikey must have found him in the hallway, and it's like, oh, is Mike with you? And he goes, no.
And then I burst in the door cursing.
Yeah, I think you need a map to get in here. It was kind of,
well,
I was going through the outdoor. I was turning on lights. It was a whole thing.
We like to keep it that way.
The spooky dark lit hallway. Like, are you guys back here? Like, what the hell?
Yep. And then that's why I walked out front, because I was like, oh, it's getting close. I'm going to walk out and grab him and bring him in, because I know everyone has a little bit of a issue trying to find Brozone Studios is well hidden. That's the way we like it.
We need somebody out there spinning one of those signs when we have guests coming to the studio.
Sweet.
That would be awesome.
I would like that.
That might be a who draws the short straw night type thing. I'm thinking it'll be me.
Maybe we get an intern, maybe. Bob, you are the sign guy. You're
That's
coordinated
fine.
enough to throw that thing around.
Yeah, I'd actually have a good time. You guys might have to drag me in here from that duty.
Well,
but for a conversation like this, you wouldn't have to.
Yeah.
I'm ready. And
oh, man.
Well, we actually, like you said earlier, we got to hear him at Frogman Festival.
Yeah, I was
too,
just going to
so
say.
we got primed a little bit.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we actually met James at Frogman Festival. Jeff Craig from Map and Black put on the first annual Frogman Fest. You were the headliner. The whole place, there was not a single seat, by the way, in that entire room.
Being brought in
while
Jeff
you
was
bringing seats in. We're like, we're about to throw down here.
He had the frog painted on his face like a warrior, and he was bringing in chairs come hell or high water, because that was fantastic. A one-day event like that where you saw people really hang on, like nobody was leaving early.
Yeah.
It was
awesome.
great. But James gave an awesome presentation about
Thank you.
the history, the folklore, the legend of the Loveland Frogman. And it was fascinating because, Bub and I tried to do a research episode. We did basically the Ohio Grassman and Friends is what we called it, where we covered the Minerva Monster, the Ohio Grassman, some cryptids. We did a little piece on, the Loveland Frogman and so forth. But we just couldn't find that much information on it. And we kind of came to the conclusion, like, this is probably not legit. Like, I don't know. It feels like that story really morphed over the years, which is where you came in and totally blew our minds, because now it makes so much sense how you get from this, and you broke it down beautifully, to Frogman with a magic wand performing a magical ceremony in a riverbed. Okay?
Went from what might have been an iguana to, Lord of the Rings-esque.
And I don't know if you can touch well, first of all, before we hop into it, why don't you tell a little bit about
I saw what you did there. Yeah. Hop into it. Nicely done. Yeah. Nice one for you there.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you mean to do that?
I didn't.
Oh.
That's the genius of what just happened.
It is.
That blew my own mind. You pointed it out. Anyways, shit.
Did you mean to do that?
Tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you kind of, you've been at this a long time. We were reading a little bit about you, and you growing up with Boo cereal and late night movies. And,
I remember
I
that
grew
cereal
up with USA Up All Night with Gilbert Gottfried. And so late night they would play Critters and Attack of the Killer Clowns and all these kind of B horror movies and strange movies. So
I had to go to his house to see that stuff because we had rotary antenna, so I wasn't getting any of the cool channels.
Yeah, well, it's funny because we when I was growing up, we had one color television. It was downstairs.
Yep.
And whenever like the old classic scary movies would come on, it was always when my dad wanted to watch a sports program. Oh. So he would make me go upstairs to watch it on the little black and white TV. And he in his New York accent would go, your stuff's in black and white anyway. You don't, because I always had to go and watch it.
Yeah,
the little rabbit ears and stuff like that.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, wow. I was born and raised in the Hudson Valley of New York State, which is a weird place in and of itself, and it's got a lot of folk tales and urban legends, and you name it. I was growing up in the time where you had everything from mass UFO sightings that were going on to Son of Sam, to Amityville Horror. They were all there.
Right.
And so...
And they have stone chambers in that region.
Yeah,
there's a lot of really weird things happening.
And my dad used to take the train to work, and he would always come home and he would have a copy of the New York Post. And it's kind of like a National Enquirer version of the news.
Right.
And I just remember flipping through it, and they used to have these salacious headlines and things like that. And so I was always obsessed with these strange things. And then people would start telling me stories about I think it was 8 years old when I did my first ghost investigation, because I read in the Orange County Post, someone had written a story about this haunted cemetery, and there were enough facts in there that I was like, oh, I think this could be true. So I begged my dad to take me out to the cemetery. So my first investigation, at 8 years old, was me wandering around in a cemetery while my dad leaned up against the duster car and chain-smoked camels. And that was my first investigation.
Love dusters.
That's amazing.
But I had the article, and I was like, okay, this is her name is Jessica Graham, so I'm looking for her grave. I was always interested in trying to find the truth behind these scary stories, because I would hear a ghost story and then find out that it wasn't true, and I'd be like, it's not scary, and it doesn't do anything to me anymore. So to go back and find the history and be like, ooh, there's something to this would really get me going. And it was The Legend of Sleepy Hollow that really hooked me, because that the setting for The Legend of Sleepy Hollow is Tarrytown, which is not too far from where I grew up.
Okay.
And Washington Irving, who wrote The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, as well as Rip Van Winkle, well, he fell asleep up on the mountain right where I grew up.
Wow.
So you start reading these, and it was always the field trip in elementary school to go out to Tarrytown, the setting of Sleepy Hollow, in the fall, and eat and drink everything made of apples.
Yeah.
And then inevitably hear The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. But my one teacher decided she was going to convince us that The Legend of Sleepy Hollow was a true story. And how she did that was, when we got out there, she took us to the bridge that the horsemen couldn't cross over, and then took us out to the cemetery and then pointed out the graves of the characters. And that blew my mind, because I'm like, this story's got to be true. And then I found out that Washington Irving so loved the area that he borrowed
Wow.
the names off the tombstones.
Wow.
Wow.
I think he made up for it because he's actually buried there now, Washington Irving is. So you can go there to Tarrytown and see.
That's
but
so
but at that
crazy.
point, I was like, okay, that story's not true. What are the true ghost stories?
Sure.
And that's what started me
Yeah.
down that path. I was in my first professional ghost group in 1985. We weren't even a ghost group. We didn't even call it. We just went out and looked for things.
Yeah.
When I moved to Georgia in the 90s, it was the same thing. There weren't ghost groups. There was no ghost shows. There wasn't anything. So it was
Right.
just kind of my
Yep.
going out and
Yeah.
doing all this documentation. And
Every
then,
man for himself.
yeah, pretty much.
Even in
Yeah.
the 80s and 90s, we grew up.
There wasn't
You had
that much going on.
unsolved mysteries every other
Right.
week would have maybe a UFO story or
Number one
You know
show.
that
God, was that a good show.
Super famous the gentleman that was possessed. Gosh, I can't remember his name, but that was a big kind of national possession story that was on Unsolved Mysteries back in the day. And then, Leonard Nimoy had his show, but
Yes.
I mean, compared to now, it's just like, it's unbelievable what
Correct.
people can tap into.
Sure, yeah. When I moved to Ohio in 1999, my original intent was to just join a group,
Yeah.
but there weren't any. And so I was kind of arrogant, naive enough to be like, I'll just start my own group. And I called it the Ghosts of Ohio because ghosts was plural, so it sounded a lot bigger when it was just me. But I called it the Ghosts of Ohio because I wanted us to kind of be like ghosts in that we were always there, but only people that really needed us to be there could actually see us. So from the start was like, we are going to have bylaws where we are not going to share private information with the general public.
Very good.
Yeah.
For many years, it was a struggle. When the ghost shows hit, they all wanted me to be on it, but there were these non-disclosures and things. So I'm like, this is not
Yeah.
for me. But I've been totally blessed as along the way I found members that have been with me decades.
Yeah.
So very long. So it's kind of like once they've found it, they were like, I get what you're trying to do here.
Yeah.
Now the weird writing came about because, as I said, I grew up in New York, so I was familiar with New Jersey. Used to go looking for the Jersey Devil.
Yeah.
Would go to concerts down in the Meadowlands. Used to go to Action Park, which is Traction Park.
Class Action.
Is
Park.
that the documentary
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
Netflix?
Yes,
Wow.
it is, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I've
That's
seen that.
crazy. That's so great. That's so
Yeah.
good.
I would say most of those stories in the documentary are true.
It seems
It was
pretty credible.
it was a great time to be alive because it was a entire theme park that was the inmates were running the asylum.
And they were all kids.
They were all kids, and none of them were in their right mind. And it was just, different story for another day. But
That's hilarious.
many stories, and I do have a few scars that could probably date back to that. But I was also familiar with the magazine at that time, Weird New Jersey. But I was in Ohio, and it was right around 2003. And then Mark Skerman and Mark Moran, who are the two Marks who did Weird New Jersey, they put out a book, Weird New Jersey. And it was pretty much the format now that all of the weird books follow. And, I need to ask them how they found me. But they contacted me because I had just written a story that was big news back then where I had spent about 6 months debunking every legend associated with Helltown. And you have to say it like that all the time.
Yeah.
And so they asked me, they were like, would you be interested in putting the Helltown story in Weird US? And I was like, well, sure, I don't care. And then they came back and they were like, you seem to have a weird eye, which I didn't know what that meant at the time.
What does that mean?
He's just got an eye for the strange. And then
I think what it meant was because they said, would you be interested in being the primary author for this book, Weird Ohio? What I believe that they meant, Mark, I need to contact you and ask you. But what I think they meant is, for me, what all of the weird books were based around is this premise. I can give this away now, but we've all done this. We've all been driving down the road and went, man, that's weird. I wonder what the deal is with that. And kept on going. Mm-hmm. I turn around.
Yeah.
I go back. And so I think that's what, that I would, because when I started doing Weird Ohio, we all had a list. So Andrew Henderson did sort of like the abandoned sections, and Lauren Coleman started with the monsters, like Bigfoot. But I had a list of the ghosts and the not abandoned, but like the roadside oddities. They had a list. But I would go down there and I'd be like, whoa, what's that? It wasn't on my list, but I'm like, this is weird.
Yeah.
And so I think the fact that I was coming back with more weirdness, they really dug that. So that ended up going to all of the different weird books in the series. And then other publishers were coming to me and they were like, hey, what about this ghost stuff? Do you want to write something about that? And I was like, sure. So,
right.
I always feel a little bad when people are like, how do I get started? How do I get published? And I'm like, I don't know.
Following that trail. Well,
I just keep doing what I'm doing. I mean,
exactly.
Well, but that's the thing. They want you to break down motions that you're doing that you don't think about necessarily. Like, it's the whole concept of like asking somebody how they throw a perfect 100-mile-an-hour pitch or serve that ace in tennis or whatever. If they have to think about it, it's a burnt down process that you have built in. Same way how Mikey can establish relationships with people and contacts, and he has this ability, you have this ability, and it's tough when you have to try to figure out what you're doing and explain that to somebody.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
But I would say you have these characteristics and traits from the age of 8 and probably earlier, but 8 was the first excursion apparently. So, okay, between him and Tom and Jim, you started at 8, Tom went to a rock quarry at like 12. He said his mom would drop him off for a week to camp to hunt fossils.
Jim was 8 as well.
And Jim was like 8 when he went to interview the last living Civil War soldier in Toledo, Ohio.
We should let everybody know, we actually found out about James back in the day because James wrote in Weird Ohio and covered our friend Jim Bowser from Wapak, who we've been friends with since 07, I think.
And Wapak is short for Wapakoneta.
And we're like, how have we never heard about this temple?
Yeah.
This is back then. It's pretty well known now. A lot of websites and different crews have been out there covering it. He's like, well, actually, I was in this book, Weird Ohio, if you haven't heard of it. And like, oh, what's that? I remember going to the library and basically reading the whole book.
I think he has a copy at his house, though, too.
Yeah, he does. That's what he showed us.
He does, yeah.
So we have a mutual friend in Jim Bowser, which was really, really cool.
And Jim is like the iceberg of weird. He's got more of the greatest crazy. I encourage anybody to take a day trip up to Wapakoneta and stop by and take a walk through his yard. James can probably attest to that.
Indeed, yeah.
In the summer, that's a definite worthwhile sunny afternoon stroll.
Yes. Definitely.
And if he's there, try to catch him and get him to tell you some stories and have a snack prepped with you, maybe bring an Uncrustable or something.
We can't get out of there under 7 hours.
Just one? Not just one?
We can't get out of there under 7 hours. But just wanted to preface that.
Yeah.
But,
Absolutely.
Going back to that time, so you have Weird Ohio, Weird Indiana as well. So, you were talking about these people are approaching you for paranormal investigation shows and so forth. It seems like, you're such a good speaker. You can really, really break down a lot of these things. And, we've watched a lot of presentations. We've worked a lot of conferences. We've kind of been around that. So it is difficult. It's a really, really hard job to hold and capture an audience for that long with, the Loveland Frogman breakdown was just awesome to piece by piece and just taking that timeline through. And is that something that you really have to work on in terms of like putting that presentation together? Does it just kind of fall together over the years and you just got to kind of organize everything?
It's a great question. It kind of varies on. I've been doing public speaking things on the weird stuff since the 90s.
Yeah.
I've also been obsessed with the Loveland Frog
since
I moved here. in the 90s. So a lot of what was in the presentation was just my personal research. So it was really just sort of putting it together, looking at the flow of it. Because in all honesty, when I've known Jeff Craig for forever, he actually was. We met because he joined the Ghosts of Ohio, and he was in the Ghosts of Ohio, and it was kind of funny because he was working on his Hidden Ohio map at the time.
Yeah,
but I didn't know it, and I've it's not hoarding because I catalog them, but I've got over 2,000 now books in my paranormal library. It's my strange and spooky library. It's all cataloged and stuff. And what I love about it is that when I have family and friends over, and even when we have ghost meetings once a month in my house, it's like it's the lending library. You go down there and people sign them out. And Jeff started taking a bunch of books, and I was just like, oh, he's really like reading them. But then he was also taking my Queensryche CDs, which I have to ask him about that. But
I love Queensryche.
Yeah, me too.
He always wanted the first Mind Crime. He didn't go back for the second. But I think I know the answer why for that. But then I asked him, I was like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm kind of doing this like map. And I was like, that's really cool because way back when I had also been obsessed with the legend of the Athens pentagram, which was the idea that if you take the 5 biggest cemeteries in Athens County and you line them up on a map, they form the shape of a giant pentagram with Ohio University in the middle. I had actually gone into map stores and, being incredibly naive, been like, hey, I heard that if you line these cemeteries up, you make a pentagram. And that's when I realized that some people don't really care for those sort of things. So when I found out that Jeff was doing that, he was a cartographer and did maps, I was like, what can you tell me about this? And he was like, well, I've kind of been going out looking for these things. And I was like, that is totally cool, and stored that away. And then years went by, and Jeff, he had to leave the group to do other things. And then he did the map in black. And then I was writing Southern Ohio legends and lore. And I was like, I'm going to finally do the Athens pentagram. So I was like, Jeff, how do we work that? So I've got some stuff from Jeff that's in there. As we were talking about that, I think it was after Comic-Con. We were both at Comic-Con. I was presenting, and he had a booth there for his maps. And he said, I'm thinking about doing this Frogman Festival. Would you be interested in speaking? And I was like, yeah. And I think Jeff thought originally I was going to speak on the ghosts. And I was like, I want to talk about the Frogman.
Right. I got this whole...
And he said something along the lines of, well, would you be able to fill like 45 minutes to an hour? And I went, if I cut it down, yeah. And so
I did like 2 hours, didn't you?
No, I think because I think we had to do 50 minutes or something. Because I did.
Man, you went through a lot in 50 minutes.
Oh yeah,
that's crazy.
Like the Tasmanian Devil.
Oh
Like it was awesome.
It was like I couldn't stop.
Yeah, you were on one, man. It was so awesome to see. I was like, this guy's.
It's like the Ace Ventura, like sucking up all the wind, like the.
Yeah,
but I had no. I don't think either of us knew, because I said, I've been obsessed with the Loveland Frog because it is. I think it's one of the things that makes Ohio so weird is when it comes to cryptids, every state's got a Bigfoot.
Yep.
Leave it to Ohio to go, yeah, but we're going to have a grass man too.
Yeah.
And everybody's got like a Loch Ness Monster kind of thing. And then it's like,
well, and
we're going to have South Bay Bessie. Yeah. And then
Mothman was seen in Ohio as well. I mean,
so I love that.
It's one of the biggest. I mean, you can't trip over at those events and not find a Mothman sticker, dude.
Indeed.
I mean, Loveland Frogman is, I'll tell you what, we have a couple pieces of Frogman art in here that we just got at CryptidCon and just different events.
And that's
everybody makes Loveland Frogman
the
art.
Worst thing, the only bad thing about the festival was because, as I said, I was sitting there telling my wife, I'm like, I don't know if anybody wants to hear this.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like
your conclusion.
They like the idea, and so I was like, "Holy crap!" But because there were so many people, there were actually a good 20 or 30 that couldn't get in.
Yeah.
the amazing thing was I talked to all of them because I'm like, if you're spending the time to come out and see me of all people, I'm spending time with you.
That's awesome.
I didn't get to get any vendors. And when I sent my wife out, I'm like, I want the terrarium and I want this and I want that. They were all gone.
Yeah. Right at the end. I know people were starting to load up by the time you were done. But yeah, I mean, your booth was right there. I remember, I came up and introduced myself. It's like, hey, we're, helping out with AV. And after you were done, it's like, hey, we do this podcast too. Like, you just blew our minds. We need to have you on the show. If you would ever, that would be incredible. So, here we are, man. And I
love it. And a lot of people say to me, they're like, how did you get on that podcast? And I was like, it was the weirdest thing. They asked me. I mean, and I don't know what that is. A lot of people they're like, why aren't you on this show? Why aren't you on that? I'm like, they don't ask. They don't ask me. I'm like,
right.
I'll come and spin a yarn or two. I mean,
and that's how I met Jeff Wilson and Ross Hamilton and a lot of those guys, which I know you've come in contact with them as well. As after Jeff saw one of his presentations out at Serpent Mountain in like 2017, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to introduce myself. Yeah. And just kind of took him off guard a little bit. He's like, why is this guy so intense? But it was after such a great presentation where I just couldn't contain myself. It was like, I need to know more about what this guy is right. I need to know more about this information. And then, it was a kind of a co-presentation with Ross Hamilton. It was just unbelievable. Giants and Serpent Mountain legends and, and eventually we met Tom and Terry and, so it's and you're no different. It's like and Tobias as well, from Singular Fortean. Yes. We talked to him afterwards. We've been keeping in contact with folks, but it was just an overall a great event. And if you could, I know a lot of people from Ohio. We've been networking with a lot of awesome other podcasts and other shows since we've kind of kicked the show back on, and there's a giant cryptid community and people love cryptids right now. It's such a popular, Instagram, I can't tell you how many cryptid Bigfoot accounts and cryptid accounts there are. I know it's really hard to break down, but what kind of led you to down the road with Loveland Frogman? What are some of the things that you found out about the origin story of the Loveland Frogman?
The first, I don't remember I knew of him, her, it.
Yeah.
before I moved to Ohio. I don't remember what book it was. It was a hardcover. But it had what has now become this iconic image. It's an illustration of this giant half-man, half-frog thing that's sort of looming over a guardrail.
Yeah.
And the story that is always associated with that is that's what this thing looked like. Basically a 5 to 6 foot tall, half man, half frog thing that police officers shot at.
Right.
And when I first heard that, I was like, that's the most badass cryptid I've ever heard,
Right, yeah.
I mean, you've got like Bigfoot chucking things, but he's always in a distance. This is the thing that policemen, and it had the names of the officers, and I'm like, there's got to be something to that.
Yeah.
And so when I moved to Ohio, I had a short list of the places and things that I wanted to investigate. It was Hilltown, Franklin Castle, and the Loveland Frog. And when I started digging into it, the first thing I did was go, dating myself, you go to the microfiche, and you sit there and you start digging through the newspaper thing. And it all went back to basically one newspaper article about the sighting in 1972. But it was there were 2 police officers that saw it roughly 2 weeks apart. The first officer, the one who saw it first, who didn't shoot at it, never spoke about it. He's still alive. He still doesn't speak about it.
That's what I remember you saying. Yeah.
And to me, he
still won't.
He doesn't want to be on he's afraid that, his peers and people around him and being ridiculed. A lot of people don't ever come out and speak.
And I have done everything short of showing up at his
with
front-
$100 grand. Jeez.
I don't think I'd ever show up with that. The candy bar.
I was about to say that same thing.
Well,
Tell you what, I might tell you the story. You show up with $100 grand candy bar at my house.
that's been in the news lately. Logan Paul showed up to Chuck Clark's house with $100 grand for that UFO footage. And
guess he needed more publicity. Is he kind of?
Yeah.
He wouldn't sell it.
No, he wouldn't.
He would not sell
Wouldn't
it.
take $100
Wow.
grand. But man, I would love to talk to that guy. So
Well,
you kind of ran into a wall there.
In a way, and I've written to him actual letters and kind of people that he knew, that he was friends with, kind of sent messages to him, but he doesn't want to talk about it. And what I have hinted out, I've never actually come out and said this to him because it's a bit morbid, but when he passes, he is witness zero.
Yeah.
He is the first one that saw the creature that is known as the Loveland Frog. If he doesn't share it, I mean, I've gone so far as to be like, off the record, I will not say anything. I just want to know, what did you see? His story, when he reported what he saw, he has never commented on it. The second officer changes his story every couple of years.
That's what me and Bub kind of dug into. That's when we were like, it's tough to validate because this guy's stories constantly, and you can find blogs from like the 90s.
Yes.
In the late 90s where he wrote about the Loveland, the encounter.
And the stories vary as widely as, so the second officer is the one who shot at it. In the original version, which is in the newspaper article, he is the one that's interviewed. It's after his sighting. And he said that he shot at it. He believes he hit it. He thinks it might have been an iguana, but that it fell
That's
into
right.
the river.
Right.
He has changed that. And the most recent version, which is when it was the Pokemon Go sighting,
Yeah.
2016, I think, that was when this officer, now since retired, came out and said it was a tailless iguana that he shot, killed, threw in the trunk of his cruiser, took back to the station, showed the first officer, and the first officer said, yep, that was it. Except the 1972 article where he is interviewed,
Yeah.
none of that's in there. So if he didn't want to get ridiculed, wouldn't he then say, yeah, I shot
an
it.
iguana.
Here it is. Not
Yeah,
only
or-
that,
yeah.
but the 72 article says that they did a sketch of it
Okay.
because they didn't know what it was. And they sent that sketch to the then curator of the Cincinnati Zoo, who looked at it and basically said, we don't have anything like that, but this is what they saw. So I did verify that a sketch was made. It was sent there. That guy really was the curator. He existed.
Wow.
Why are you going through all that if it's in the trunk of your car?
Right.
Now, I'm not saying that it was this creature because that sketch that everybody says what they saw is not the actual sketch. I've never been able to find the actual sketch.
Right.
But my point is that if this second officer, if he really did on that night in 72, shoot it, kill it, chuck it in the car, why are you making sketches?
Right.
And I think that might have something to do with why the first officer is like, I'm not getting involved in it.
Probably, yeah. He muddied the waters. Yeah. The validity of the story is completely in shambles at that point, you know?
Exactly.
There's no, I mean, it's not, it's a shame. I mean, it really is a shame. But so how do you get from iguana to weird frogman, mystical shaman with a magic wand, performing ceremonies?
I think it's
in the river. Like, how did that come about?
I think it's 3 puffs and 2 beers.
Right. Or, geez, something a little stronger.
This is why I became fascinated with it, is because I was thinking the same thing. Because the two things that you can consider iconic is that this frog creature is 5 to 6 foot tall, walking on 2 feet, and has a magic wand.
That's it. That's everything. That's everything.
And that's why I think the legend persists, is because damn, I want that thing
want
to be
that
real.
to be
I want it to be
real.
real.
It'd be pretty cool.
I want to have that ceremony performed on me.
Right.
What if they're out there still?
I mean, 2016 Pokemon Go guy.
Yeah.
Any validity to that?
No, absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
I remember, yeah.
But in the 2016 version, it was still oversized frog hopping around or running like iguana. In 1955, there was, and in some of the 72 stories, they'll say like a businessman saw the same thing.
Okay, yeah.
There was no businessman, but in 1955, first he was a maitre d', and then he was a waiter, but he basically worked in restaurants. A man named Robert Honeycutt was coming back from work in Cincinnati, middle of the night. He was approaching Loveland, so he was in the same kind of area, but he wasn't he wasn't that close to the river.
The Little Miami, Big Miami.
Correct. So he's in the general area, but not really. But he sees something on the side of the road. Headlights hit something in a field, so there's no water involved. He thought eventually, at first, that it was 3 men kneeling on the side of the road. So I love this. He's quoted as saying, so he stopped the car to see what was up. He said he thought that maybe they were praying or doing something because they were short. When he got out and he looked, he saw that they were not human.
Whoa.
And how he described them as they were about 3 to 4 foot tall. They were human-like, except they were entirely gray. And he couldn't tell if it was an outfit or if their skin was gray because it was all uniform and tight.
Like gray aliens, maybe.
Yeah. And he said that their chests were like bulging on one side. So it was kind of like one arm was shorter than the other because they were kind of like leaned out, like all weird looking.
Quasimodo on the front.
A little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that he said that they appeared to be bald. The head was gray. They had wrinkles on the tops of their head. And then 2 dots for eyes, no nose, and then a long, wide mouth, which he said when he looked at it, here it comes, reminded him of a frog. So that's when I say, ladies and gentlemen, the Loveland Frog just became a man.
Right.
That's why in some versions they say Loveland Frog man. But one of them, there was one standing in the front, 2 almost like a triangle, like the 2 were further back on either side. The one in the front held up a metal rod. He said it looked metal, and blue sparks shot out of it. There's your magic wand.
Holy shit.
And at that point, he's like, I don't know if I like what's going on. He said then that the one in the front took the metal rod and put it down near his leg, and he thought that he was like attaching it or something, but that they appeared to be looking not at him, but across into the field. He looks over in the field. He doesn't see anything, but he's like, I'm out of here. He leaves. The first place he goes is the police chief's house, middle of the night, which is where I say that's instant credibility that he at least believed it was something because if you're like, I think I just saw these weird creatures.
Yeah.
Let's go to the police station.
It wasn't kids playing with sparklers late at night.
The chief actually said, because he's interviewed, didn't smell alcohol. He didn't appear to be under the influence, but but Honeycutt appeared petrified. So much so that the officer grabbed his gun and a Polaroid camera because he was like, I wanted to see it too.
Yeah.
And they went back out there. They saw like an indentation where those creatures or whatever.
Something was there.
Something was there. And then they both said that they smelt something like, I'm not going to remember, but it was like, burnt alfalfa and almonds. And I'm like, the hell does that even smell like? But they both said it smelled like that. And that afterwards, they both reported that from time to time driving past that area, they would smell the same stuff. Obviously, and that's what I say in the presentation, whatever they shot at in 72 is not what those things were. I'm convinced those three things weren't of this world.
Oh, yeah, they were definitely ETs. I mean, to me, that's what it feels like.
And that's why the story is so fascinating to me, because you've got to pull those apart, but it's a lot easier to slap them together, go, here's your frog, and move on.
Yeah, that wide, weird smile, that's the only thing that kind of I'm hung up on a little bit, because Greys typically, so maybe it's just a different type of ET, but the Greys have that little slit in their mouth for their mouth. But boy, I mean, the first story to me seems more valid than the 72.
Correct.
For sure.
I think I don't know what it was, but I believe the first officer in 72 did see something.
Yeah.
Now, whether or not it was a tailless iguana, I don't know, but I think he really saw something.
4 foot, 5 foot.
Yeah, I think it was an iguana. It was something because he describes it as running.
Yeah.
So it's not standing upright like the ones from 55 were.
And ladies and gentlemen, if you go to Loveland, Ohio, that area is a place where some weird frog creature would live. Those river valleys, it's beautiful there. Yeah. It's such a beautiful, we have friends that live in Loveland. But that whole area, I mean, outside of Mason and into Loveland, is just magical.
Yes.
And it's got a vibe to it, dude.
It's got a castle too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But we stayed at the what was it? The old munitions factory.
Yes.
They converted those into Airbnbs and condos. So that's where we stayed.
Nice.
So we let the Cryptids of the Corn,
night.
the Cryptids of the Corn podcast boys, we let them and all, and we were hanging out having beers after Frogman Fest, and they found out we were staying there. Like, oh my God, that place is haunted, dude.
Yeah.
They're going nuts. We didn't report anything back. Stoner definitely did not. Stoner was out.
It took us a minute to get in there that night. I remember we were having trouble with the code.
We had trouble. We couldn't get in, and then once we got in, we went to the wrong door, and we were trying to.
That was awesome.
Hopefully,
sorry
no one
to whoever
home.
that was. Yeah. Like this key won't work.
5 minutes. Oh, it's
Mike
the wrong
comes up.
door.
He's like, "You're at the wrong door." We're like, "Shit."
You were 5 minutes at the wrong door.
Yeah.
Like shaking it and stuff.
Yeah,
there was a key code button. You had to like punch in the number. So that's why I was like, we got to
Cryptids
get
of the
going.
Corn likes to drink cider. So we had a good time. We had a good night with them.
That was a fun time.
And their listeners.
That bar we were at was excellent.
Oh yeah, good time. And it was a great festival. We had an awesome time. The venue was cool.
Yeah.
We were just doing some simple light AV, but hopefully we were making the speakers' day a little easier by helping out with PowerPoints and whatnot. And we had a little table set up out there, but met some great people. I mean, sometimes we'll walk away from a conference and get like one person of interest. We've done events in the past where we've met Clifford Mahooty, David Lone Bear Senepass, and some of those guys, and we've shot some stuff with them, and then Tom and Terry's events. There's always folks that we keep in contact with, and so now that the show's popped up, we just have a list of people that we've been collecting. I've been collecting, and as a collective, we've been trying to get in here and have on. So it's been those conferences are great for that, because we can go in there, we can work the event, and then meet all the speakers and authors. Hey, come on the show.
Yeah.
So let's switch gears here a little bit. I was looking at your map of crybaby bridges
Yes.
in Ohio, but America as well, or you're focused in Ohio?
It's just Ohio right now, but behind the scenes, I am getting ready to release the U.S. one.
Nice.
Yeah.
So we're from Mercer County, outside of Coldwater, Ohio, and in between Coldwater and St. Henry, Ohio, we have a crybaby bridge that you have covered.
Yes. Yes.
Blows my mind. And we've been out there so many times. You talk about 3 puffs and 2 beers. It's probably more like a lot more beers.
I still
and a lot
haven't
more
heard
puffs
anything. Yeah. I don't know what it's going to take.
But
I don't really want to find out.
I know we
either.
freaked ourselves out where we thought we heard some stuff. I mean, we were definitely like 17.
Yeah.
18.
Yeah.
We'd always go to Crybaby Bridge.
We weren't rigorous.
And did we hear
scientists.
anything? Did anything happen? Probably not. No, definitely no. But had a blast.
There you go.
It was so much fun. We'd hang out down there and get real quiet and just be like, shh, 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 you hear that? oh, it's nothing.
Yeah, we wouldn't keep. You wouldn't be. Yeah, but we didn't keep silence for very long.
No.
It was not a very fruitful hunt.
No, and then
we
we'd end
went
up just
ghost hunting though at our friend's mom's house.
Yeah, we did in Pickwa.
Yeah, she has
Old
an older
mansions
house.
in Pickwa, Ohio, the historic district of, of our buddy's mom owned a home there.
Really?
And had so much activity over the years with her dogs, like the animals would freak out. But, we kind of found out actually that house is, it's really the land. That those spirits are actually going from property to property, that it's not necessarily the house itself. But more or less like just that whole area. And it's, the gentleman that brought us, Nick was his name. Our buddy actually worked with this guy that was called himself a medium. I don't really know exactly. I'm on the fence about mediums. But the stuff that he came up with and the stuff is pretty intriguing.
Yeah.
Some of the things that, he reported back to us. But Crybaby Bridge, back to that. What is it about those local legends that...
Well, first I want to know, when you went out there, was it the only one that you knew of? Or
Yes.
Did you,
Well, of course.
And we have by the way, we have a Spooky Hollow as well. In an area, what is it, Bub? It's up in Versailles, the Seven Hills.
Oh, Seven Hills? That's
Seven
Spooky
Hills.
Hollow?
We
I always
would-
thought Spooky Hollow was on Indiana towards the A&W root beer stand we'd go to.
That is Spooky Hollow. Sorry, I had the two mixed up. But Seven Hills is something completely different, where our buddy would take his Beretta and gun it over the Seven Hills, and he would get like 2 feet of air and just fly over those hills. But Spooky Hollow, we had a Spooky Hollow, not in our county, but just north. What would that be? Been Shelby or Dark County?
Dark County.
Is that Dark County?
I'm not great with that.
But
I think it would be Van Wert County north of us.
why does every little place have a Spooky Hollow and a Crybaby Bridge? It's wild to me.
Yeah, and how I got into all the Crybaby Bridges, and that's why I asked whether it was the only one that you knew of.
Oh, sure.
Is when
At the time,
when I was in New York, we had a Crybaby Bridge, the Crybaby Bridge,
Okay.
and the story was as vague as they come, which is
Right.
a lady had a baby and she threw it off the bridge, and if you go there at a certain time and you did now what I call the ritual change, whether you got to flash your lights or honk your horn or whatever.
Turn your car off on the bridge.
Yes.
We had turn your car off and then honk horn. Did we honk the horn? We did
Maybe.
something. There was some kind of a ritual.
Yeah.
Stookie, if you're in the chat, Stookie is in the chat. I had texted him because Stookie was obsessed. Our buddy was obsessed with Crybaby Bridge. Anytime he drove, we would always end up at Crybaby Bridge on the weekend. Maybe he can type in the chat.
my kinda guy.
If he
I'll
remembers.
tell you what, there's not many bridges back home, but there's a bridge by my house.
Yeah.
Growing up as a kid, there were 2. But the one bridge that we would play under in the daytime,
Yeah.
at nighttime after watching it, I'll tell you what, I'd walk home from Julie Holman's parents when they would have parties or wherever. I'd get to that damn bridge, and still to this day, it's just like,
Georgie's.
oh my God. I'll tell you what, if you wanted to really freak my sister out, that would be a great prank sometimes. Just hide out under there, put like a speaker box that could like trigger that noise.
Oh my!
Hey, let's walk home tonight, Jamie.
Jeez.
So, growing up in New York, it was like one bridge. That was the whole thing. And when
Right.
I moved to Georgia, I had a friend go like, "Hey, did you ever been to Crybaby Bridge?" And I was like, "In New York?" And they were like, "No, there's one like right down here in southern Atlanta." And I'm like, "No, that's in New York." And he was like, "No, it's not." And then I was like, "The hell?"
That's so
And when
crazy.
I moved to Ohio, same thing. And I was like, "No, that's in." Some people think it's in Georgia, but it's actually in New York. And they were like, no, it's here in Ohio.
Yeah.
For Weird Ohio, I covered 13 of them.
Yeah.
And the Ohio Crybaby Bridge Project, which is on my website, I think I'm up to 36, maybe?
Yeah.
And all of them claim to be the Crybaby Bridge.
sure.
But why I started collecting it was because everybody in general who knows about a Crybaby Bridge always says the same thing. Nothing happened,
Yeah.
but damn, was it fun.
We had a great time.
It was so much fun. And I wanted to start digging into why is there in some versions the mom throws the baby off and other times she accidentally drops it. And sometimes there isn't a baby. and other times they're in the car. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what are all the things behind all this?
Yeah.
I also was on a mission to try to find the Crybaby Bridge somewhere in the world that started all of it. And I haven't found that yet, but I've noticed that what happens is my wife gets this from me a lot. We'll be driving somewhere and I'll go, that's haunted. And she's like, how do you know? And I'm like, look at it. It should be haunted. Look at it. So I think what happened is that any spooky looking bridge that you got to walk by at night
Yep.
Yeah.
suddenly becomes haunted, and eventually it becomes a Crybaby Bridge.
Right. And that, dude, that totally makes sense because our Crybaby Bridge, okay, it comes in like this from this part and then it elbows and then zigzags through. But in that portion, it's basically secluded. So you have to slow down to then take a left to get on the bridge, slow down again to take a right out of that. So that left and right is really short, right, Bub?
Yeah.
And it's that section in the middle that's the creepy part.
Because it's creating as you're going through it, this Alice in Wonderland where you're like,
dude.
something's not normal.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden a story
And
gets
you're-
applied to it.
Yeah.
Your adrenaline would just get jacked up. Like as soon as we would start kind of getting close to it, your adrenaline would start spiking.
Yes.
Then the car shuts off.
Yep.
And then you're sitting there in silence and you're just like, it's exhilarating.
And
I remember it just being.
That's how it is.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is I've learned with all good ghost stories, they don't ever die. They just mutate every couple of years.
Sure.
And I call that the grope factor because it's a lot of people are going out there with girlfriends and boyfriends and stuff. And so you go out there and you tell your girlfriend, you say, you know, the story out here is this baby did
Get 'em all
that.
creepy.
Right. And they get scared and huddle up and you cuddle and stuff like that. You know, you break up with her and 2 years later, you take, say, another girl out there and you tell her the same story, and she's like, I heard that story, and it's not true. And then you're like, yeah, but there's a guy with a hook for an arm. And you start adding things into it, then all of a sudden, you know, so there's a lot of that going on. But I will say that as I dug through the history of the Ohio bridges, I did not find any instance where a baby died on the bridge.
Yeah.
I did find people getting murdered on bridges, though. I found bodies being dumped on the bridges, and I'm like,
Mafia activity.
and I'm like, is that
The mob was huge in Ohio, so that doesn't surprise me.
well,
at
they're
all.
more recent than that.
okay.
There's even one up in it's escaped me, but there is an actual bridge, a Crybaby Bridge, where they found a car on fire with a woman inside of it, and that's not been solved yet. So there's some recent ones, and I think that plays into it because a couple of years go by, and all of a sudden that ghost story gets attached to it, and they're like, yeah, and that's not only haunted, but it's a Crybaby Bridge. So you've kind of got this twisted history that sort of takes place there, which is the stuff that I actually love because it suddenly makes that bridge a place you're not supposed to go.
Yeah.
Which makes us all want to go there.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Do not enter. Let me in.
Right.
I mean, what do you say when people maybe have said to you, well, this isn't history? Or, you know, have you ever, you've had that somebody tell you? This,
not
like,
today,
it's not important.
but I get it a lot.
It's not important.
I get it a lot.
It's so important. To say that's unbelievable to me.
I've given up caring about that because it's I have to walk this fine line because when it comes to ghosts and even folklore, the historians will say that's not real history. So my pushback is yes, it is.
100%.
Because it becomes part of our tapestry of our individual lives that we go out there and we've experienced these things, and it is part of history. The flip side is that the ghost community I have to walk a thin line with because I firmly believe in ghosts. But I admit I don't know what they are. I don't know how they do the things they do, and I don't think anybody does.
Right.
Because if somebody knew exactly what a ghost was, we couldn't doubt they existed.
What's your biggest reason, or is it just a collection over the years of the stories, or why, when you say it with such confidence or conviction, you believe in ghosts? What convinced you or pushed you over the edge or gave you that
reason? Like one.
Yeah, was there one glaring example of like, oh, that got my attention, or was it just
first and probably a collection?
It's more of a collection, and by ghosts, I would say that it's something paranormal. It's something that I can explain. A recent case that we worked, and when I do my cases, I try to do a combination of psychic and feelings as well as actual pieces of equipment. What I'm looking for is to get the two of those to kind of merge.
Sure.
So that if someone is feeling, hey, I feel weird over in that corner, don't even need to be psychic. It's just, if you go in and you're like, something feels off there. If I can put a piece of equipment in there that's rendering something, I'm like, there could be something to it. It could be you've got incredibly high levels of EMF that are causing those feelings.
Sure.
But I'm always looking to kind of get those two to balance. We were at a private residence, and the owner had reported for years that the back, this closet area, that they would have weird feelings. They reported seeing things for years.
Okay.
So we went out there and went in, and we had tripwires, which are basically little EMFs. There's probably you can get a string of 10, and I think the bigger one has 20 in. But basically, individual EMFs that kind of work almost like elves. The ones that, no, those are, yes, they are. The ones that actually flicker, K2s, sorry. So basically, the higher the level of EMFs, you're going to get the higher level of colors. These are individual, just attached on a string. So we're putting them up on the wall in the closet, and they are giving off incredibly high levels of EMF in an area that is kind of like this. And then went like this.
And there's no like big electrical panel
And they went like
behind
this.
it. Wow.
Well, you ready for the stinger? There was no electricity in the entire house.
Oh, Jesus.
It had been cut off, and we verified it had been cut off because there had been tragically a fire there.
Wow.
It had been cut off at the box and at the pole.
So there's
But it's expanding and contracting.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
We are actually not me, my long-term member of the Ghost File, Mark, who is responsible for saying there was a portal in the Twin City Opera House, because we were doing an investigation there for my book, Ohio's Historic Haunts. And they said that up in the catwalk, there's ghost of red wine Robert and a little girl up there. And they have this weird looking shrine.
Okay.
I don't know if they still do. That's got, it's weird.
Why is that shrine up there?
The shrine's weird because it's a combination
Is it like a
of,
Masonic shrine or something?
no,
Or-
it's even stranger. It's a child's table that is filled with gifts for the ghost girl as well as half-drunk bottles of red wine.
Whoa.
So it's a little.
Good grief, Charlie Brown.
So we're up there trying to communicate and do things, and I had a cell sensor, which they call it the ghost meter, but don't buy the ghost meter because you've just paid 15 extra bucks for the sticker that says ghost meter. It's a cell sensor.
Okay.
It's the one that beeps, red lights, and that kind. I had it in my pocket, and I was leaning up against the wall, and Mark was there with Sean, another investigator. Middle of the night, we're the only ones there, not getting anything, and all of a sudden, my thing starts to beep a little bit, and then it starts beeping and faster, which basically means the intensity of the EMF level has gone higher. And we were like, well, that's kind of weird. And behind us is just a wall to the outside. Again, we're up in the catwalks. We're up on the second floor. And there was a level of high EMF that went out like this till it was taking up the whole entire wall.
Wow.
And then eventually went down like that, and it disappeared. The fascinating thing is that normal EMFs or electricity, it bleeds. So if you've got like an EMF detector and you've got it on the wall and you've got a 4.0 and you start to move it away from where it's registering, you're going to get like a 3.8, a 3.5.
Yeah.
This one you could take it, and I'm making up this number because I don't remember at the top of my head, but it's an 8.0, and it would go 8.0, 8.0, 8.0, 0. So it was really defined.
really sharp walls
like
to it.
literally, like if it's like a door, it's opening and closing this door.
And so we had never encountered that where it had such firm, defined lines.
Right.
And Mark
you usually get more of a gentle sloping drop off, like
exactly. And so Mark
walking into the beach.
So wild.
Mark, who has a PhD and is an actual doctor, he's a scientist.
Wow.
But I looked at him and I said, what could make this happen? Thinking he was going to come back with some scientific explanation. And he looked at me and he goes, a portal.
Wow.
And ever since then, and now to this day, Twin City Opera House claims there is a portal up there. I don't know what that was. I just know that normal EMF and electricity do not work like that.
That's wild. No. So you've had some pretty. Have you ever had a? And I hate to put more of a like any encounters where you've seen an apparition, things moving in investigations, stuff like that. Of other, I know what you're saying with the correlation of using the instruments as well. But anything like that again in that vein?
I have not. We've had objects move, but we've never seen them move.
Okay.
I think. Probably the most fascinating thing that we've been sort of digging into that we've recently discovered is there's this idea of the doppelgangers, or the idea of like a double.
God, here we go.
Hold up. You want doppelgangers? We can send you to Doppelganger Central.
Yes.
Like the Dollar
For
General
real,
of doppelgangers.
if you're researching this right now, bro.
We've got the guy for you.
Yes.
Tom.
Yep, Tom Johnson from the House of Fake Ops Rock Shop. That property is built on something, but
there's a fault line. The energy from the mound.
Their house was built by Masons.
Yeah,
he thinks the house itself is some kind of portal. But
the guy that originally owned it moved out, left everything as is, moved out.
He got it so cheap because he was just so freaked out. He just let the house go. The Dollar General, which sits there now, was another house across the street, and now the Dollar General's haunted right there. But Tom has had doppelganger phenomenon. So there's some sort of bending of space-time is my theory on this.
I would love to get down there because
you should really put that. I think that'd be a good one for you as far as like
bro.
He started talking about it and I was like, wait a minute, because I don't even think he knew it was called a doppelganger. He was like, yeah, people will see me, but it's not me, but they think it's me. And I'm like, are you talking about doppelgangers? Like that's you've got all these stories of it too.
Like,
where
Tom would be in the rock shop. And someone would see him, Terry would see him out by the wood pile, out in the field, or, doing something with his rock somewhere. And then she'd be like, oh, well, you were out here.
No, and then walk in the rock shop and he's in there. And then just be like, but you're outside.
But you're outside. He's like, no, I'm in here.
I'm right here.
She's like, no, but you're out there. And it's happened with not just Tom, but other people as well. I mean, I don't like rehashing other people's stories too much, but we have several clips in that interview where he kind of
We'll have to hook you up with him.
Yeah, I would, because I'm the one that has the doppelganger. So
I want to
I might not really be me. Well, I have my
of
infamous one that could really scare you, but we'll come back to that in a second because we've discovered what appears to be audio doppelgangers, and normal
John Keel,
kind of.
He had some of that occurring with him.
Because normally when you think of doppelgangers, it's
the physical.
You're seeing something.
Yeah.
We kind of stumbled across these bits of audio. So you guys will appreciate this because when we do investigations, I don't know how EVPs get on recording.
How do they? Yeah, I've always thought that myself.
Back in old-fashioned days, as my daughter calls it, they used to say that the ghost could manipulate the electromagnetic field, and we were recording on magnetic tapes. So I'm like, okay, maybe. but now there is no tape. So how does that work? So when we do an investigation, we use everything. We have used old boom boxes and regular cassette recorders to micro cassette. But the one backup that we use are studio microphones that we hardwire into a mixer,
Whoa.
8-track mixer, because shock mounts,
Whoa.
because we want to make sure, you know.
Disbro's going nuts. I see you, Disbro.
And the reason for that is one of my pet peeves is like when people are like, why do ghost stories whisper? And I'm like, it's called wind. Because they take their recorder and they're like, is there anyone here? And you're like, put it down.
Yeah. Shock mounted mic. That's genius, dude.
So we have those. And on one investigation, so after an investigation is done, what we do is we record on everything from DVRs to, we've got all sorts of audio and video that when we divide it up and we all take it home with us. And then once a month, we have a 3-hour meeting, first Sunday every month at my house. And each member basically says, okay, I reviewed this. Here are the things that I think are strange that we should do. I happen to be reviewing one piece of audio where I'm right in front of a studio microphone and I whisper, no, what's it set on? Oh, I guess you go, no, what's it set on? To which I'm like, I just broke one of my major rules, which I always tell people, do not whisper because you don't use your vocal cords and I can't figure out who you are. Right. So announce yourself and always do it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I broke my own rule. Thankfully, I reviewed it, so I'll just.
Yeah.
But a mistake was made, and Mark actually got that same piece of audio. And in the meeting, he goes, and I got this weird piece of audio. And he plays me whispering, no, what's it set on? And I'm like, I get it. It's me. And he's like, it's not you. And I'm like, it is. Okay, you can all make fun out of me. I broke my rule. Fearless leader. I'm a rule breaker. I'll never do it again. And he's like, it's not you. And I'm like, all right, knock it off. It is me. And he's like, it's not you. You weren't in the room.
Huh.
And I wasn't. If you look at the video camera.
But it sounds like you.
Except when you look at it
in
compared to me.
Waveform.
The waveform, because what we do is.
This is like some Predator stuff when he's trying to mimic them in the jungle of like saying the same.
Carl Weathers.
Want a piece of candy or whatever he's saying.
The actual video camera that was recording over there, there's nobody there. You don't hear me walk up. You don't hear me walk away. I'm suddenly right up on the mic whispering.
Dude, I'm telling you, this doppelganger phenomenon is what we like to call it. Yeah, doppelganger, you see a dude in the airport. I get it all the time. Apparently, I look like 1,000 people.
Yeah.
I've had people, hey, are you in Spain in an airport? No, dude. That's different. What we're talking about here.
That is different. I don't think I've ever heard that
like
before.
you can look like other people. What we're talking about here is this phenomena of, like you said, there's out at Tom's house specifically. I mean, just. Is there some sort of like bending of space-time? Is there some kind of like John Keel's the window that he talks about, this window where, you know, things line up perfectly and these energies or these shifts in our reality kind of get bent. And, you know, is it necessarily like an alternate version of you that's popping into that window? I don't know. That's But when there's other phenomenon, this doppelganger, there's UFO phenomenon, there's paranormal phenomenon, ghosts, and then all of a sudden people have doppelganger phenomenon in these locations.
Right.
It's strange, man.
All right, so here's my infamous scary doppelganger story that everybody freaks out about, which I always preface with, for years when I was giving presentations, one of the questions people would say to me is, what's the weirdest thing that has ever happened to you?
This is the weirdest?
Except when I told it, yes, I told it as being the weirdest. And at that point, I went, this is really scary. Why did I not freak out? And it's now become the scariest thing. It wasn't scary when it happened.
Yeah.
Well,
you were kind of aloof to it probably in the moment, you know, or maybe not.
I don't know how to describe how I felt but I do tell people if anybody can explain what I'm going to tell you, I want you to, because whenever I think of the story, so yeah, thanks guys, I'm going to be thinking about it tonight. I don't have any explanation for it. So it was at Waverly Hills, and we had rented it out. It was just us.
Southern Ohio?
No,
Waverly?
it's in Louisville.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And big old TB hospital.
Okay.
It's on all the shows, and we had rented it out, just my group. And what I always like to do when I go to these places is I will ask, what should I do and where should I go if I want the best chance of something happening? A show that will not be mentioned had just been there. And they said, well, they say the fourth floor, that there's two different things up on the fourth floor. One is people report seeing doppelgangers, but the other is they see the creeper.
God.
So the creeper is this black human-like thing that creeps around on its hands and knees
Oh, jeez.
on the ceiling.
Oh, Jesus.
So they said that if you wanted to see the best chance of seeing the creeper, go up to the fourth floor, which it's just patient rooms. And the sad thing about Waverly Hills is that there was no cure for TB at the time.
Right.
And so if you're looking down the hallway, on one side, there are rooms that then have, and all the doors are gone, but there was another door that then went out to a balcony because they thought fresh air could cure you. On the left side of the hallway where you just faced trees. So when you became terminal, they moved you out of the balcony rooms to the other side. So it's very sad to just think about what's going on there.
Right.
Tuberculosis is a horrific disease to die of.
Yes. Slow, painful. The treatment where they thought at one point was, let's collapse the good lung
Oh, Jesus.
and give the other one chance. It'll pick up. And it's like, who thought that was a good idea?
I don't know, but you got to be careful sometimes.
Bub was a pulmonary nurse, I think.
I did for a while. Yeah, first couple years.
Wow.
Yeah, saw a lot of chest tubes, pulmonary fibrosis. Saw some pulmonary fibrosis is a really bad one too. That your lung tissue basically stiffens up over time and just solidifies, and you slowly just can't inhale, exhale. Yeah, I had one
It's
gentleman
creating
like
a
that.
dark atmosphere.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
It's this like residual negative.
There's not a lot of
black
happiness in a TV ward.
garbage
No.
energy.
I think that's probably
Yes.
there's no, hey, they got better.
Right. Exactly.
You know, it was like going to the Civil War hospital back in the day. Like, I don't think he's coming out. But
Right.
it was just a flesh wound. Doesn't matter.
Exactly.
Doesn't matter.
Gangrene, bro.
Oh, shit, you got yourself with a stapler. You're done. But anyways, back to the creeper.
So-
and I'm trying to keep the scary thoughts at bay a little bit because I'm a big
I'm getting
pussycat,
chills
man.
already.
I get nervous.
Well,
like,
it's coming. So, I'll give,
I still don't like going in the basement of my house to do the laundry. Let's just say that.
this probably might not be the good story.
Well,
Let me
I'm
tell it,
sleeping. I'm sleeping with a dog, so I'll put him on guard duty.
but- Okay. So they said if you wanted the best chance to see the creeper, you go up to the fourth floor with a group, a small group, and you have all the group except for one person go to one end of the hallway.
Oh God, no! Hell no!
Dude, we haven't even gotten to the stairs.
Okay, he's the bait.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And have the other person go to the other end of the hallway. You face each other, turn off all the lights, and that the creeper would come creeping up behind the bait. So I said, I'll be the bait because I'd been doing it for so long. I'm like, oh, that's what you got to. I mean, that's what I want to have happen. I want to see it. So
Sure. Okay.
Do what you gotta do.
Hey, man. At least you're in it. You're
Right.
in it to win it.
So the other three people in my group were the only four on the entire floor. They go to the other end of the hallway. They face me. I have got a video camera in my hands, and then I've got, it sounds very cheesy, but it's very cool, like a headlamp
Yeah.
that I always tilt down because it's
Yeah.
like the Gremlins, when I turn it on, bright light, blind everybody. So it's always
Oh,
facing,
sure.
facing down.
Yeah.
So what I did was I took the camera down. The headlamp was still on. I put the camera down between my legs so it's facing down towards the rest of the group. I stood up, clicked the headlamp off, and I kind of just went like this. I can see them vaguely.
Yeah.
I can see shadows of them down the hall, but I'm just standing there and I don't feel anything weird. I feel absolutely nothing. And I guess it was about 20 minutes or so that I hear one of them in the group go, "Where did he go?" And then someone else in the group go, "I think he went in that room over there."
But you're not moving.
And then they go, "Jim?" And I said, "Yeah." And then I heard the G-rated version. "Oh, shoot, that wasn't him." So what they later claimed, the people in the group claimed that they saw, is after seeing my shadow in the darkness like this for about 20 minutes, I turned my headlamp on, illuminated my entire body, bent down, picked the camera up, went like this, turned to my left, and walked into the room on
Shut up.
leaving
What?
an empty hallway, and I never moved.
Whoa.
What?
What the?
So they saw you walk into the hallway.
Out of the hallway.
Out of the hallway. Okay.
Fully illuminated with my
That's a kicker. Not just like the shadow of you doing
correct,
this.
that I was fully illuminated.
Not like they're like, oh, there he goes, like hush hush, but they're like, hey, shit, we can see him. He's
But
all
you
lit
did
up. There
turn
he
the
goes.
light on.
No,
You did not.
No, he stood in the darkness.
I was in the dark. So the weird thing,
That's the doppelganger of,
but
Waverly Inn.
but is it?
or is it the creeper?
Because here's the weird thing is,
The creeper doppelganged you.
or was it something totally different?
Yeah.
Because the odd thing is that I asked them, I was like, well, how did I come back? Right?
It's a great question.
And what they said, which when they said it, I was like, oh, that makes total sense now. So they're looking at me, at my
Yeah,
shadow.
yeah.
And I turn on the light, I leave, and I go off to their
Sure.
right. They thought that I was just bored and I just left. So when they were like, where did he go? I think he went into that room over there. They were no longer looking here. They were looking off to the right towards that. When they called out to me, they thought I'd call back from that room saying, yeah, I'm in here, I'm bored, whatever. When I called back from the middle of the hallway, they looked back and I was there.
Oh.
So they don't know how I came back. But to me, I didn't feel anything. There were no time slips. There was nothing like that. So that I can sleep at night, I tell people, whatever happened, it happened to them.
Yeah.
Because
Fair
I
enough.
never left the hall, but I don't know. People have asked, which is a great question, is that did I ever go into that room, the real me, go
that's-
into that room?
Yep.
And I did afterwards. I don't recall going in there before. The really weird thing is that the camera, the video camera that was between my legs facing them, gets that whole conversation. But the light, my light never comes on, and I never pick it up until afterwards. So
So the camera never records you. The camera's
Doing what they
getting
allege.
picked up,
Correct.
Yeah.
seeing the light going into the lens. The lens
Right,
would have
as if
picked up that light.
None of that happened.
It
None
would
of
have
that
picked up the
happens.
movement.
That's crazy. It's like they
But
all
what
saw
is
a
that?
mirage.
Right. What is it? And those are the things that I'm like, there's something there. There's
Yeah.
something that can't be explained, but I don't know. That's why I said we call it the doppelganger thing, but was it? Because
Yeah.
did it make the double right over?
There's a lot going on
Yeah.
with that one.
That's a lot.
That's
to
a
unpack there.
whole lot of. So, I mean, what really, when you kind of look back on it, like what really kind of scared you? You said it kind of scared you a little bit.
It scared me afterwards because when that happened, I was just like, well, that was weird. That was kind of weird. And
Right.
and it didn't frighten me until I started thinking about the logistics
Yeah.
of what had happened. It was
Yeah.
like, no, the camera didn't record anything, but multiple people saw this thing.
Yeah.
They weren't scared.
Yeah.
Because
They
at
just
the
thought
time,
it was you.
They just thought it was me. So it was
Yeah.
afterwards where you're like, I think the biggest fear to me was that where did the real me go?
Yeah.
I don't think I went anywhere. It's almost like did some sort of, I had to have gone somewhere because they like
That's crazy.
it's the
That's
weird
crazy.
it's the weirdest thing. And those are those nuggets that when you come across them, you're like, that's my proof. I don't know what it's proof of, but it's proof that there's something there.
Yeah. I mean, you have research, you have these folks that are witnessing it, you have the camera, you have your point of view. I mean, there's a lot of
corroboration of weird shit there.
exactly.
Yeah, that's strange.
Yeah.
Jeez,
Wow.
I don't know. That would be tough. I've seen a couple things, but never intentionally.
Yeah, and when I've seen,
like
You know what?
I'm the same way because we are very. It's kind of neat to look at sort of the history of the Ghosts of Ohio because we will sort of ebb and flow when it comes to, okay, just hardcore equipment, all equipment. And
Yeah,
we need to
the
document.
gear.
And then we're
Yeah.
like, we could be so focused on that screen that there's ghosts jigging behind us. And we are never thinking, because we're like, we got to watch this. We got to watch this.
Yeah.
So then it'll swing the other way, which is like no equipment or it's very passive. It's just over in the corner. And we just kind of get, see if we can pick up feelings and things. So it's interesting to watch us go back and forth. But when we do investigations, the one thing that we try to hold to is that we always want to know where everybody is at specific times. So if we were at, if we were here and we were going to do an investigation, I would say, okay, the three of us, we're in this room for the next hour. So until 9:45 or whatever time, an hour after that, we can go wherever we want in this room, but we can't leave the room.
right.
So we know where everybody is. There have been numerous times where I've been sitting at our command center. It sounds really crass, but it's basically where we got all our stuff plugged in.
Yeah.
And I will look over and see somebody and be like, who the hell is that? Who's supposed to be? And then I look and I'm like, there is nobody supposed to be. And I look back and there's nobody there. And I'm like, all right, who the hell was that?
Right.
They weren't floating.
Right.
It just looked like they had their head. It just looked like a normal
It was taking up
person.
enough space to give you that. Yep, that's somebody.
To
but
piss me off that I'm like, there shouldn't be anybody over there, and so those are the kind of things that when you come across, you're like, there's something.
do you ever bring animals with you? Dogs?
We have. Yeah, we have. Because I firmly believe that animals, dogs, but animals as well as children pick up on those things. Now with children, I think it's because the weight of the world hasn't crushed them yet, and they're told that's not
Agreed.
real.
Agreed.
That's not real.
100%.
But animals don't get that. Animals have to look at everything as being a potential threat.
Yes.
So I love to use animals. There were a couple of investigations where we used them. We even went so far as to for my Ohio's Historic Haunts book, we did an investigation of the lighthouse up in. It's got the ghost cat. Oh, it's escaping me.
The ghost cat.
They have a ghost
Nice.
cat. Fairport Harbor.
Okay.
Oh, get out of here. So my wife grew up really close to
I was
there.
going to say, yeah.
We go there quite often to go hit the beach and from
So this
Painesville.
So the story of why it's a ghost cat. Okay, this part of the story is true. Is that man named Babcock? He was the last lighthouse keeper.
Okay.
And his wife fell ill, and so whether it was because he did it she became bedridden to make his wife happy, or because that's what she always liked, but he started chucking a bunch of cats at her. So he had all these cats on the bed, and stuff like that. And I don't know whether or not, like I said, she liked cats to begin with, or she was just bedridden and he thought he'd cheer up by chucking cats at her. But
Gotcha.
according to legend, her one favorite cat was this rather large, meatloaf-sized gray cat. When the wife passed away, the legend is that all the other cats stayed there except the gray one. The gray one just disappeared. Years later, decommissioned the lighthouse keeper's house, they have now made into a museum.
Okay.
So you go to the museum now, and before I think it had been open, but at some point they were adding air conditioning. So you had a guy whose lovely job was to go into the crawl spaces and crawl underneath and put the HVAC in, right?
Yeah.
So he's kind of crawling through the basement, and he said that at some point he felt like he was being watched. And he started to freak himself out. And so he took his flashlight and he turned it on, and he was allegedly face to face with what he called a mummified cat.
Oh, God.
And because this is Ohio, that mummified cat is on display to this day in the museum.
Wow.
But they gave it its name, Sentinel. People use that as validation that that's the gray cat. It wasn't officially mummified. It just got underneath it. But it is quite disturbing to see.
That's wild.
But they claim that they see a ghost cat running
Through the house. Okay.
So when we did the investigation, again, we sat and we thought, and we were like, okay, it's a ghost cat. And we use, if we're looking for trigger objects for children, we use toys, or something that people liked when they were alive. So we were like, all right, let's get a bunch of cat toys and laser pointers, because we had them all. So that was the first and only investigation where Sam, one of our investigators, is going like,
That's
"Here, kitty,
awesome.
kitty," and she's got the laser pointers out. And Wendy, we had catnip too at one point, I believe.
There you go, cat people.
But if it
I
is
love
like
that.
if the paranormal energy or that spirit energy is there, and you're trying to almost like coax it out or engage it, and not
Correct.
getting out the
Yeah.
Ouija board, but how would I make it so that this entity would want to interact with this space?
You're exactly right.
Playing music. It reminds me of Ghostbusters when they have to activate the ooze with the
The
positive
ooze.
energy or the negative energy.
Ray, have you been sleeping with it?
Yeah. I mean, but a lot of that kind of stuff, they had that even in those films of like, there's ways they're trying to measure it, but also there are these undeniable like just experiences of like,
I am totally with you, because we have been experimenting with with in general how to make ourselves more appealing to the ghosts, and we have done several investigations of the Defiance Public Library.
Okay.
And they have It's always interesting because they came across me. I did a presentation up there, and it was sort of like you don't seem as weird as we thought you were going to be, which
You're actually kind of normal.
Kind of normal.
And so,
You're like, it's just a title.
yeah,
but not.
Weird Willis. I mean, I wear that moniker with pride.
That's
but,
awesome. Absolutely.
They were like, we have these things going on. We don't know what it is. It's not bad. It's not, would you want to do an investigation? And the interesting thing about the Defiance Public Library is that a janitor did pass away in the building. He was older, and it was back in the day when the bottom was where it was his apartment.
Yeah,
so he
sure.
did pass away in what's now their storage area, but it wasn't like he was murdered or anything like that.
Sure.
And they were like, so I don't know if he could be it. He had a grandson, Wild Bill Davidson, who became like this famous jazz musician. And a lot of people said that he loved it. He used to come and visit his grandfather, and that he loved it. So is he the one? And then it shares the property with where old Fort Defiance used to be. So we were like, well, who the hell is this ghost?
Yeah.
So what we did the first time we went out there is, again, Mark, one of the investigators, it's one of the things I love about Mark is because we were like, well, how could we maybe do like something with the fort? And Mark goes, well, I've got some costume. I don't know, are they costumes? He used to be
replica.
He used to be a reenactor.
Yeah.
okay.
A replica uniform.
Well, that's interesting.
And I was like, well, that might work. But
yeah.
what did you do? And he goes, I was a surveyor. And I'm like, no one but you, Mark, would choose to be a reenactor and be the surveyor. But there is a surveyor's stone in the middle of the fort remains.
Oh, wow.
Well, then they're important.
And I'm like, that might work.
You might be onto something.
So he comes out. He's in costume. Wendy has actually got period military music.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, I went and found Wild Bill's recording, the grandson. So over the course of the night, Mark is out there at the fort, and I tell people, this is my favorite part, we didn't know it at the time, okay, but we're out there in the middle of the night. He's standing out there in uniform like this. Wendy is hiding with the military stuff playing, And we didn't realize it was like their Jazz and Rib Fest had let out. And so there's people stumbling along the water coming back from that. Guys, in about 3 or 4 years, it's normally how long it takes to percolate. I know somebody is going to say, I was walking by the fort one night, I was coming back from the Rib Fest. And man, there was like this ghost guy standing there, and there was weird. It was us. But we also, subsequently, we had girls dress up as flappers as well to go down there. But when we were playing Wild Bill's music, we didn't realize anything at the time, but we have a recording of someone tapping in perfect time
To the music.
to the music.
Okay.
But then what happened is that was at the end of the night. So we looked at that and we're like, I don't know if that's Wild Bill. I don't know if it was somebody from the fort who heard that music. It just so it actually raised more questions than answers. But it also is like, okay, but then did that mean the ghost had to hear it? Because it wasn't like 1 or 2 knocks. It was like
Yeah, real rhythmic.
Tapping along with the song.
on wood, except where that microphone was right near metal shelves. So where is that wood coming from? And like,
Okay.
I'm a big proponent of if you are hearing things, we will tell people like if they hear someone walking up the stairs, we tell them count the stairs. Because are you actually hearing something real going up the stairs, or are you hearing a residual, something from the past that's replaying?
Fair question.
We've got pressure plates that we'll put on the stairs because in my mind, if that's a real ghost, whatever that is, it's got to have enough density or mass or stuff to exert
Sure.
that pressure on those stairs
Sure.
to make them creak. So we will go and figure, is this residual? Is this intelligent? That tapping, if it was a ghost, had to be intelligent because it was tapping in perfect time with that particular music. So it wasn't like we heard rapping and it was at a beat. So it's like, okay, but if it heard it,
Then you can interact with it.
but
on
does that mean
level
you
some
take
way.
your ears to the other side? Like when they're talking, you hear what they say, it's an intelligent response. So do you take your vocal cords to the other side? Like, how does that work? And this is what I love is because I just go, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's cool, right? I
Yeah.
don't pretend
Something
to have
interesting.
answers
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I'm just looking for them. But I think if more people in this field were just like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't have the answers. Let's unpack it.
Yep.
Wouldn't be as evil a field as it sometimes becomes.
Yeah.
And saying you don't know is always like coming from a background in the hospital and stuff. That was always like nobody wanted to say they didn't know because
It's
God,
taken
you're
as a
supposed
sign
to-
of weakness.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're supposed
Yep.
to know everything. And my favorite thing about a person is when somebody can say, "I don't know."
But I'm going to
Yep.
try to find out.
Right, because at least I know you're going to go
Yep.
get the answer
Yes.
somewhere, and you know that process.
Yes,
If you don't
exactly.
have to know everything, but you
Exactly.
got to know how to find the
Yeah,
answers
yeah.
and who does have that answer. But
I want to backtrack real
Yeah.
quick. We had a great question. What was on the camera that was going back to the
The creeper.
location? What was on the
camera that was between my legs?
Yes.
Nothing.
Just it was shooting out.
It had them.
Yeah.
It captured their conversation
Okay.
about where did he go. It had my response, but it doesn't move
Yeah.
or have any light appear until the real me.
So it's just shooting them. That's all you can see.
Correct. Yeah, there is, and it does not move. It's literally between my legs, shooting down the hallway. So you hear them say like, "Where did he go?" You hear that conversation,
Yeah.
which when that was taking place, I had turned on my light and picked up the camera.
Yeah.
The camera never moves.
Yeah. Man. Jeez.
yeah, I'd be a little creeped out.
And I mean, do you guys? What's your next place that you guys are gonna investigate?
I don't know.
You have something on the radar, or something you're currently researching now?
There are 2 private residences that are on there, and those are the only ones that I know. I know we're going to go back to the Defiance Public Library.
Okay.
And then there's a couple of other locations that we have lined up because my, I guess I can make this announcement, but my Ohio's Historic Haunts, which I did with Kent State University in 2015, which I say is like my Sergeant Pepper, because that was the one that was the album, the book I always wanted to write. And Kent State came to me and they said, "You seem to be into this goat stuff. We want to kind of do something, but we are a university. So do you have, an angle that's unique?" And my angle was kind of like what we were talking about earlier, is that ghost stories are part of history, and that some historic locations over time gain a reputation as being haunted, and that even if you can't validate the haunting, that ghost story can still work to keep actual history alive.
100%.
And for that book, there were 21 historic locations in Ohio. They got its own chapter, and it was divided into thirds. The first third, straight history, when it was built, who built it, that sort of thing. The second third were the ghost stories. No internet stuff, no got it from other books. They were one-on-one interviews with owners, employees.
That's great.
That I sat across the table, and it ended up being like 220 hours worth of interviews, because I wanted to be able to tell people who said, did that really happen to them? Yep. I can say, I don't know, but I looked them dead in the eyes and never called BS. They believed it. They believe, and I think that's the power of the ghost story.
Yeah.
The last third was me getting locked in the building overnight. Yeah. So all of that is, I can now say that since 2015, that's been the one book that's kind of just chugging away. They finally decided it needs a part 2. So
nice.
We're in the process of lining up.
That's awesome.
These historic locations that are...
Man.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
You got that nose for it, I'm telling you.
But the interesting thing about that is, for the first one, I needed 20 locations.
Okay.
They just had to be they had to be in Ohio, historically significant, with a reputation as being haunted. If I went in and did an investigation, didn't find anything, I'm of the mindset, doesn't mean you're not haunted. Ghostly fish weren't biting that night. Didn't get it. It was just mainly bringing it all together.
Right.
I thought me coming in as a published author, Kent State University backing it, and that I wasn't coming in and saying there's a portal to hell in the basement and all this kind of stuff, these locations would be jumping all over it. There were close to 400 locations that were contacted in order to get the 21. Some were like, we're not really haunted.
Yeah.
And I get that. Yeah. Other places were like, we do tours here for schools, and we don't want to run the risk of some people saying, I get that.
Sure.
Other ones were just like, no. And I don't know why.
Wow.
We're hitting the same thing with this one, where I can be like, look at this book. You're going to be just like this. And I don't know. I think part of it is, sadly, that ghost hunting has gotten, it's now, you're like
control.
Those TV shows.
Yeah.
And
I'm sure.
Reality TV, those words shouldn't come together.
You're running into some brick walls, because people have an idea of, before you even get in the door, they've got something built up in their mind of who this crew is, who you are.
Yes.
Based off of, unfortunately, some of these shows that, have come out to be completely bogus. And, so, I mean, we would love to get you in contact with Tom, because I think Tom's property and the Dollar General, I mean, you have these poor managers at the Dollar General. Tom will come in there and just, getting a couple things here and there, and like, oh, you wouldn't believe what happened again. All the change, just the pennies, were created into a circle.
They come over to the rock shop, and they come up to him and they go,
they're like, hey,
do you know about this place? Like, is this store haunted? And he'll be like, yeah. Oh, yeah. He can watch the lights flicker on and off across the street at night.
Wow.
And in his house, too. So across the street.
Pots dropping off the shelves.
He thinks there's a little unmarked cemetery back behind the rock shop that could have something to do with it. But I mean, I think Tom, he would be chomping at the bit to because he said he's had paranormal investigators out there, and they've gotten so freaked out that they just leave.
Really?
They don't want to be there.
And he's like, we've had groups come out, and they all just take off.
They got what they were looking for.
And see, I tell him, I said, I'm sorry for that, because my whole thing is, that's what you wanted to have happen. And
they must not have been ready for it. I don't know.
The thing that I personally take issue with is that when I watch these shows, I can look at it as what it is, entertainment.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And people who want to go out and just run around cemeteries at night, don't do that. It's illegal. But if they want to do that and just scare each other, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
But when you're crossing the line and you are going into people's homes,
Yep.
you are looked upon as being an expert, regardless of whether or not you are. And I will preach to all of my investigators. I'm like, you are now an expert.
Yeah.
How you act, you are going to change these people's lives forever. And if you walk in and you get scared, you better not run. You better not do anything because this is their home.
Those guys kind of ran.
That's
But Tom's pretty tough to where he was like, oh, I guess it just wasn't for them.
Yeah.
You know, he's like, I'm going
It's
back
just
in the
so
house.
wrong, though. It's like, what do you now? I always admit that I watch these ghost shows, and when they're like, "Why don't you come and get me?" I'm like, "Get him, get him,
Yeah. Right.
get him good."
Right.
You can get what you're
And then they
asking for.
run, and I'm like, "What are you running for?"
If you ask,
Yes.
sometimes you will receive.
Oh, I firmly believe that.
I mean, I would, something that I'd be interested with that is obviously, getting you in contact with Tom, but having us come out and kind of shoot the behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, I was already thinking I want to go see that in action.
The before and after interviews and
I'll help
out. That could be a really cool project for all of us because the mystery of Tom's property and everything that's going on. And with the crater being there and Serpent Mound being there and all the just burial mounds and, the electromagnetic activity that they have just from the crater causes all these weird weather patterns and disturbances and
Cars to die while you're driving them.
Film crews, all their batteries die.
Batteries.
There is legit this electromagnetic phenomena out there that AEP has gone out there, the electric company, or DP&L or whoever it was.
He has that fault line in the middle of the road right by his house.
Yeah, fault lines there.
Melted the power lines.
Like the wind came up and kicked up so much energy, it melted the power lines, and they told me, hey, you got a fault line right here. This is 100% a real phenomenon.
Yeah.
Wow.
The electric company came out and
He said they
told
rolled
him
up
right to his face.
He said they rolled up and he went, well, yeah, they melted because there's a fault line, and they looked at all their schematics and everything, and they went, yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
like
that's
they didn't
right.
even question him about how the power lines melted. They were like,
Tom
what
had
you
his-
just said is exactly correct.
Mm-hmm.
He's he's a knowledgeable guy, like the guy from NASA that came out there to say, hey, where's the breccia?
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for these little particles because Serpent Mound is an impact crater and we need to find these.
This is before it was confirmed that it was an impact crater.
Yeah.
Really?
Tom had already, him moving there to study trilobites, the largest trilobites in the world. That's Tom's thing. His trilobite collection was on lease to the Smithsonian. It's now inside the rock shop. That's its home now.
Yep.
All his trilobite collections, and there's a little mini whole gallery in there with, inside the rock shop.
And he still digs.
And so NASA stops by his rock shop and they're like, hey, we're looking for breccia. Do you know where that might be? Oh, yeah, I'll take you there. Come on, let's go. So he was the guy on the ground showing these scientists that then confirmed because they had the smoking gun.
Yeah.
And we did a video with Tom called the Serpent Mound Impact Crater Tour. He's been doing this tour for like 20 years, taking people around the crater. So we shot him in the rock shop, telling all the story, and we got a hold of the ODNR's microcrystal that they had scanned.
Yeah.
That shows like that's the proof of it being an impact crater is when they scan. So we went ahead and got that image from ODNR, just submitted a whole thing. It's in the video, and it was just an amazing day to shoot that with him. But
That's wild.
like I said, Tom can. He's kind of a lightning rod, and Jeffrey Wilson lives right down the road, so it's like to have those two guys out there that just have
there's a lot
unbelievable amount of information, but to connect the dots, I think that's something we're pretty good at is trying to help other people get connected. But I think if you guys are looking for a place to research, it could be very interesting.
It just dawned on me right during all of that. I was like, oh, you should really meet Tom.
Yeah.
If you're into ghost hunting, yeah. What about you? I got a question. What about like UFOs? Anything in that? Anything question. In that vein with the weird and the strange? And I know maybe. Oh yeah. Are you open to all that? Have you done UFO research? Have you?
I've done a lot. I'm working on a not yet named book on. I don't want to give too much away, but it's a certain year where it looked like all hell broke loose in terms of sightings across the world, actually, with different kind of creatures coming out of things, and
like the Van Meter visitor, Van Meter, Iowa, or any of those type of that.
They're like that, but but they were very similar in that you've kind of got a one-off kind of these things. But I've started plotting these things out, and the part that's again fascinating to me is I look at this and I'm like, why the hell hasn't anybody else looked at all that? Like, I'm like, what is the and it's become where when everybody's like, well, what are the new UFO sightings? And I'm like, I don't know, man, but look at all this stuff. So, the UFOs I've been since probably the early 80s because there was the Hudson Valley UFO sightings, which were Night Siege, the book, and it's been featured all over. I saw that craft twice. It was not a plane. It wasn't. I also did see, which is, it's kind of comical, is that some people will say that it was actually just a bunch of planes in formation. I don't want to get into a conspiracy theory, but I saw those. You heard their engines.
Right.
It seemed like maybe they were tweaked to be kind of loud. People said there were Christmas lights hanging off of them. You're not going to see Christmas lights that high, but they were clearly fake. This thing was huge. Didn't make a sound. It was the weirdest thing that I've actually ever seen. Like up in the sky.
What? How did you? You were just like. Were you just outside playing? Were you outside how did you just?
Here's the weirdest.
How did it come about?
And this shows like this. It's a sign of the times. Is I was coming home on the Quick Way, which is basically it had 4 lanes. So that was the big, this tiny little town that I grew up in.
Yeah.
I managed a record store, and I had just closed up and was getting onto the Quick Way. And as I was pulling on, there's hardly ever anybody out on this road, and we're going. And I noticed that there's cars pulled off on like the side, but like a bunch of them. So I kind of slow down thinking it's an accident. It's nighttime.
Okay.
And then everybody is out of their cars and they're just all looking over that way. And I looked and I was like, oh my.
What is that?
And it looked to me like the first time that I saw it, it looked like an ice cream cone on its side. So it was white lights that kind of came down to a point where there was a single red light. It was just all white lights like that. And you could see, even from that distance, so you're looking across this 4-lane, there was something, I don't want to say it was blacking out, but the inside of the cone, if that makes sense, there was something solid there because there were stars out and everything, but there was nothing in that sort of sideways V.
Yeah.
And it was just moving. So I got out of the car and stood like everybody else did. And eventually it went over the hillside and disappeared. And then we all got in our cars and just went home.
Was it written about in the papers, I would assume?
A couple of days later, it showed up in the papers, yeah.
You saw it another time?
Another time. And this was when my friend Chris and stuff, that all of a sudden became a thing. We were like, we got to go find this thing. So we were running around like Storm King Mountain, which I just love the name of that.
That's a great name, yeah.
Storm King Mountain, It's got to be stuff.
Weird shit's going on there for sure.
This big thing, but now it's not like a sideways ice cream cone. It's like flat now. So it's coming across like this. It just comes over the top of the mountain and it's just going like that. And again, it's sort of like a V when you were looking up with the red light. And it just moved across. So we couldn't get close enough to see it. But again, you couldn't see through the center of the V. It never made any sound. And it's, again, it's pre-cell phones, it's pre-anything. And I often I'm like, what the hell was I thinking? Because we went out looking for it, and we had gone out several times just trying to find it. I mean, it was showing up all over. We never thought to bring a camera. And it's just like, what were we thinking? So when everybody goes like...
Hey, you ever gone on vacation and forgot something you really needed, like a passport?
You know what, though? And this is something I talk about quite a bit. You know, I'm not a paranormal investigator. I'm not,
Right.
But something we do is video production. We shoot a lot of video and concerts. And you can have a 7-camera shoot. You might miss the lead or the beginning of a lead or an amazing hit or something, the lead singer. You could have all those cameras.
Right.
But
and still not get it.
And not get something that you look back after show like, damn, dude, we missed that moment. We have that.
That's why I
so
always
that's
love
what the
radar.
7-camera shoot. This is
right.
So to have even a camera with you to see something, first of all, like if I had a rigged out our FS7 in there, our Sony FS7 camera. If I had that rigged out on a great tripod and I was sitting there waiting, and then all of a sudden it comes over here, and then to have like a long focal length lens, to be in the right place at the right time, ready to go with that system.
Right.
Most people don't have access to that stuff. They have camera phones. So to get your phone out or to get your...
That's not going to record very well either.
Let's say you have a Canon 5D Mark III, amazing photography camera with a big long lens, and the best photographer in the world more than likely is going to miss that shot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's really, really, really freaking hard when people say, "Oh, why didn't you get it on film?" or "How come you didn't get a picture?"
Argument. Yeah,
it just drives me crazy.
It doesn't hold much water
we shoot
anymore.
A lot of things, and you miss stuff even when you're prepared and prepped.
Mm-hmm.
And
go in a lightning storm and try to time a lightning bolt to catch it.
Jeez.
Yeah,
I'll tell you what, use a long exposure, it'll happen, but it'll strike at some point in that.
But like I said, even though if you would have brought a camera, a lot of people have the camera and they're so freaked out that they just forget that they even
and this
have
was
it.
back in the days with the little Instamatic that it was like,
oh, right. Right. Yeah, there you go.
like Kolchak the Night Stalker kind of thing with the little thing, the little flash strip on the top.
The little strobe bulb.
Yeah, even if we had it, there wouldn't have been anything to get there. But when I moved to Ohio, and again was just like kind of sort of immersing myself in things, I started noticing that any major UFO crash in the United States went through Wright Pat.
Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Wright
buddy.
Pat goes deep.
We talked about this extensively.
I used to live in Dayton for a while near it.
And when you go, and it's I've gotten to the point where it makes sense to me because they have a division, and they had it there. Not only Project Blue Book, but they had a reverse
was from
engine.
Ohio State University, and they had the whole program was run out of Wright
Exactly.
Pat.
Yeah.
They had a reverse engineering program?
They have a group which does reverse engineering, and at the time when Roswell and even Kecksburg,
Right.
part of their mission statement was that they were to reverse engineer alien technology.
Right.
But that basically meant if it fell out of the sky and we don't know where it came from, could be German, could be Russians, could be from
Right.
Jupiter.
Right.
It was alien.
Yep.
They would bring it there and be like, can you reverse engineer this? So that makes sense that all of these UFO things, if something fell out of the sky, they would send it back there to see how they could put it together. And that's really why.
Dude, all roads lead to Wright Pat. Even John Keel's Mothman and all that stuff, weird stuff, was led
all
back,
goes back in there.
to Wright Pat, right down the road, dude.
Yeah, I want to strike on another weird topic that James might be into. Are any Men in Black stories, any Men in Black witnesses that you've ever encountered?
I've talked to a couple of them, and even I was at Mothman like decades ago, Mothman Festival and stuff, and met like Linda Scarberry and some of the original witnesses and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But did talk to several people there that claimed that they had seen the Men in Black. But I've never seen one, and in all honesty, a lot of times the stories that I was told was like, maybe it was just a government official.
Yeah.
I've never interviewed anybody that had said the thing about where like I don't know, pick up a pen and
Yeah,
they
they don't-
or
they don't know how to work
how to
a
eat
pen.
Jello or use
Right.
a spoon,
Use
or
a fork.
Yeah,
have
all of
wires coming out. Yeah, all kinds of weird.
They seem
stuff.
like androids where they're kind of like
Yes.
awkward and weird. And
Yeah, so never really met anyone or interviewed somebody that claimed that they had seen something that far. Most of the men in black people that I've interviewed, they came across as that it was basically, they were threatening, but it was kind of like a military person that was
Yeah.
basically dressed in a business suit sort of thing
Yeah.
that was like, knock it off, don't go looking for that. And I totally believe that those
yeah.
type of things. And I also did do a lot of research into Darren Berger's Indrid Cold.
Woodrow. Yeah.
Yes, which who had there's a weird thing where Keel tried to make those two things, Cold and the Grinning Man.
yeah,
I don't think they're the same
really.
because Cold doesn't grin per se. He doesn't have that. That came out of like Jersey and
I'm
those
unfamiliar
kind of
with the grinning man part. And I've read the book, but I don't recall that. What's the grinning man portion of his account?
Well, a lot of the adaptations of the artwork
Yes,
is with
Nat-
Indrid Cold is grinning like a weirdo.
like a sinister thing.
Yeah.
That is not in. Darren Berger doesn't make any mention of him looking like
Right.
sinister. He's, if anything, because his stories, Darren Berger's stories go on that they go off in strange little tangents, but that Cold visits him for years afterwards. So it's not just
Really?
that. There's a whole.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that it kept going on after.
And his daughter is still. I chatted with her on Facebook that she has. There was a whole weird mythos, but basically Indrid Cold, he brought like his family out to meet Woodrow like years later, and so there's like the story goes. But my point being is that in none of them is he this sort of sinister grinning man, but
well, he was speaking with him telepathically. He wasn't coming off as
correct. Yeah,
Darren wasn't scared. He wasn't. If he would have been like grinning like that, he would have been freaked out. But it was, the messages that he was getting were very benign.
Yeah, and that story is what is the grinning man type stories is in. I believe it's in Mothman Prophecies. And because of that, I think the Darren Berger sighting has now been sort of morphed into being part of Mothman Prophecies.
Right.
When really, I don't think there is
They're
a
not
connection
connected.
between Mothman and Indrid Cold, despite what the movie tried to do. But
Right. How they wove that together.
But
Well,
the-
the book was a lot different than the movie.
it was a lot different. I mean,
It
I
has
tell
a
people.
lot more in it. UFOs,
Correct.
and Men in Black, and phone taps, and phone numbers, and all that.
The journalist
That's why
from
even
Athens.
with the doppelganger voice stuff.
Yes.
That was that's what I'm saying. That was happening to Keel. People would be like, "Oh, I just spoke to you," and he's like, "I didn't call you.
Correct.
What the hell are you talking about?"
But the grinning man version is I'm 99% sure it's in Mothman Prophecies. But it was two boys that's in New Jersey, I believe, that saw this sinister looking man in black type thing that had that grin.
That's what I remember.
They've
hearing.
now jammed together where you're exactly right. That they will say that Indrid Cold is the grinning man, that they're one of the same. And
The
they're not.
grinning man has a black top hat.
Yes, it's very
suit.
men in black with
It
a
totally
sinister.
was, dude. Now that you're saying that,
He's become an amalgam of all of these different things getting thrown together. Where again, my biggest fear with all of that is you're going to lose. It's kind of like the Loveland Frog Band. Those 1955 creatures, not a frog. Let's stop saying that. It's something different because otherwise we're going to lose that.
I see what you're saying.
I think you're going to lose what they're calling the grinning man because he's now become, like I said, this amalgam from.
Yeah.
And he's, like I said, he's not part of Mothman Prophecies, but he is now. Just like the whole thing of Mothman being seen in all of these other places, that came from the end of the book, of the movie, The Mothman Prophecies, which the director has actually said, I kind of made that up.
Yeah,
that it was
they
seen
take
over
liberties.
Chernobyl and stuff. And
Yeah, they take liberties. Well, in the Mothman was seen over the that big giant mound in West Virginia. That was another area that apparently has been seen multiple times. Mounds are always connected to crop circles and weird, the Bigfoot, and it's interesting. I think the earthworks and mounds here, I have a theory and I've talked about it, but I think is kind of the nexus for the strange in Ohio. I think that those sites have activated something on the land of, I don't know, but it feels like why Ohio's been so strange for so long. We have
like
cryptids.
Undercover strange.
It's like the undercurrent of all the weird stuff is the earthworks and the mounds and like that geometry. Is it opening up doorways? Is it all, crackpot stoner theories, of course, here, but I mean, it's fun to think about. It's
but I think
people ask me all the
something to
time,
it.
why is Ohio so weird? I'm like, I don't know. The mounds are everywhere. There were 10,000 of them.
And
go to Serpent Mound. It's a weird place.
Swooping generalization where they're like, oh, this is the Adena culture. And you're like, but what is the Adena culture? It's Adena.
And after
and you're like,
Adena
but wait,
mansion.
what? And I think there is something to what you said, which is that if you look back at these before modern times where we were no longer living outside and doing things, there had to be a reason why they chose those locations to build these sort of sacred sites. So, did they already know? I mean, I know that our ancestors were a lot closer to the outside world than we are, because we go home at night and we watch TV and we don't live out in nature, so we're not as in tune.
We barely
as we
ever
once
touch
were.
nature.
Correct, right.
And
well,
Serpent
nature
Mound-
wants to kill us now. Mother Nature's had enough of us and is trying to bump us off.
And Serpent Mound being built right inside that crater, they knew that crater was there.
Right.
They had to have. They built it right inside in this perfect spot right on top of this ridge. And you're telling me they didn't know that weird energy of that crater and that fault line and it's a perfect spot. I mean, I've seen the Milky Way galaxy at night and the property, Jeff's property at the summer solstice event. Last summer, we saw the band of the Milky Way. I mean, the stars are incredible.
Wow.
If you're going to have a celestial calendar, that property, that whole area is the spot in Ohio to be. I mean, I've seen great stars in Athens out at the White Buffalo Ranch, but I mean, it's unbelievable stargazing for Ohio. I've been to New Mexico and some places like that, like Chaco Canyon up, 7,000 feet up in the high desert where there's no humidity in the air. So you've got that. But I mean, there's no light pollution. They're walking around. There's nothing to do except become an expert on astronomy and follow the seasons.
Right.
We got off on a tangent there. One thing I wanted to bring up, and this is we had the Hollow Sky podcast on our show a couple months back, and they're real into the paranormal world, but they had been told about this cemetery in southern Illinois that they refer to as Cemetery X. And not sure if you've ever heard of this cemetery, but they were told, hey, do not go to this. This guy, Ghost Hunter Dave, tells them, hey, this is serious. Like, I wouldn't go to this place if I were you. It's not for, kind of for the faint of heart. And they ended up going to this cemetery and brought some things home with them. They tell the whole story on our podcast. Fascinating story. And both of the Kyle and Steve both had things happening in their house, but saw this tall, this giant shadow, hooded figure that they've referred to as the Watcher. And I was just wondering if you had ever heard about Cemetery X, any of this type, something close to that.
No, but I want to go.
They could probably hook you up.
Yeah. That's another, I mean, I don't know how many volumes you
advertise
guys
it a
are
lot.
in for Weird US or any other books coming down the line in terms of like the scope of the United States. But I always felt like, man, that needs to have a proper, a really, Burton from Local Legends and some of the guys we've been hanging out with, but they're looking at putting together a trip to go back. And so, hey, could be. I'm
I'd
not
be in
going.
for it. I mean, when
I'm
it comes
probably
to
not going.
cemeteries, I don't think in general they're as haunted as many people would lead you to believe, simply
Yeah.
because there's dead people there.
Right, it
They
doesn't-
probably, unless they're weird like me, probably when they come back don't want to hang around a cemetery.
Yeah.
They want to, and by the time they get to the cemetery, same thing could be said for like funeral homes, things like that. They're already past. But I have come across cemeteries where I tend to get really emotional when it comes to ghosts. Is I'm not scared of them because I feel sorry for them. Because I always go back to when I was a little kid, you would hear this stereotypical story of like, oh, a husband and wife, when they loved each other and they built this house specifically to live out their days. And then he gets called away to like the war.
Yeah.
And so she goes up and, she waits for him to come back up in the window and, and he never comes back. And now you see her ghost up there waiting for him to come back. Breaks my heart.
Yeah,
So you have
right.
sympathy for
Breaks
it.
what's
Yeah.
just-
Just
Because
a
I'm-
never-ending cycle of sadness for
I mean,
that
how
poor
much would
spirit.
that suck? It's
Yeah.
like you
Yeah.
spend your life and then you consciously or unconsciously make a decision that I'm going to stay here and wait for him. And now he's not coming back and you're all alone. With like the Beetlejuice thing with a couple of jackholes who
Right,
moved in
right.
that you're trying to get rid of. And so
Modern art enthusiasts, assholes.
I think, and you had mentioned like earlier the idea of like abandoned cemeteries or something being built over a cemetery.
Yeah.
I think that could lead to hauntings. If for no
Well-
other reason, I believe that if
like in Chillicothe.
your greatest fear as a ghost, as a human being, would be to be forgotten.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
I think that's why cemeteries, if they get knocked over, the headstones are taken off something, that could end up with
Like Tom's backyard.
a ghost. Yeah, like Tom's backyard, because the ghost just is like, I was real at one point. Do not forget me. So
Yeah.
I've always been intrigued with cemeteries, especially long forgotten ones, because I'm like, is somebody out there just going, I once was. I once
Right.
did things.
Right.
Chillicothe and Waverly, Ohio both have cemeteries that have a giant mound in the middle of
Yes.
it. We just put our cemetery on top of another ancient burial
Correct.
ground.
And going back to what you had said
there's a
about
lot
an
of those,
ancient
dude.
site, why did they say that's where we're going to bury our dead?
There has to be something with that.
And then because
spot.
we're, lazy Americans, we're like, well, we'll just put ours on top of that,
Yeah, it's
so
ridiculous.
I get that. That's just laziness. But in the beginning, when there was nothing there, these people that were very into sacred sites, why did they say that's the point where we are
Right.
going to put our ancestors?
Yeah.
So I think there is something to these sort of sacred sites. I don't think they
Yeah.
were randomly placed.
Now, in the American Southwest, you go through, whether it's northern New Mexico, Albuquerque has petroglyph parks, Sedona, the Verde Valley, you'll always see handprints and spirals in the petroglyphs. And our Jeep tour guide, Kevin, in 2010, we took an Earth Wisdom Jeep tour. He played Native American flute. The first time we ever got smudged on this beautiful, out in the middle of nowhere on this vortex. And Kevin said these handprints, these petroglyphs are them going around and feeling, is this the spot? This, and then the handprint meant there's energy here. There's something here. So they're putting their hands on the rocks. And then the spirals and the different geoglyphs, the different glyphs with, they look like mazes and so forth. We went to a petroglyph park called V-Bar V outside of Sedona in the Verde Valley in 2021. And the park ranger on the inside, we went and just checked out the visitor center, and they had up on wall that they had basically a serpent petroglyph that they had just found out in the last year that it's actually a winter solstice and summer solstice calendar with the equinoxes, and it has 7 bends
Really?
in the serpent on this petroglyph, and it's marked by shadow play on the wall. with another rock that they had inserted and somehow arranged to where the dagger of light comes and hits this serpent. So I say to the guy, I'm like, have you ever heard of Serpent Mound in Ohio? He's like, never heard of it. So then we go and get a tour. The guy tells us the whole story about this serpent petroglyph. I ask him, have you ever heard about the Serpent Mound in Ohio? No, never heard of it. Well, it's got 7 bends, and it's a summer solstice calendar, equinox calendar. He was blown away. Sat there and chatted with this guy. Not much is known about this, but all over that wall are spirals and handprints and animals and all these other things. And it has an equinox and solstice calendar, just like we have right here in Ohio. Now, the legend of the Hopi is that the Hopi actually say that they came here and helped build the Serpent Mound. Now, Jeff says that, there's so many serpent mounds in America that we know of. There's 10 that he's researched. So is it our serpent mound? He's not too sure, but
that's wild.
You know what I mean? So these places, like you said, have some sort of, is it magic? Is it energy? Do they sense that this is the spot? This is where we're going to bury our dead.
Yeah, I think there has to be something to it. And it reminds me of, as I said, whenever we're doing like a ghost investigation, we kind of just explore all different avenues. And Josh, one of our members, when he had first joined with his wife, I don't know how we got on the subject, but he was talking about how he was getting like all these great EVPs and doing a lot of stuff, and I was really jealous. And I said something along the lines of, well, how do you figure out where do you go in the investigation to get all this stuff? And he said something, I might be paraphrasing, but he said, I let the house tell me where to go. And I thought that was so brilliant in its simplicity, because normally when it's like, okay, we're going to this haunted spot and the second floor is haunted and the basement over here is haunted, let's go down there. But what he does is he goes in and he just walks around. And when he's like, I don't know, I'm just feeling a little different over here. So kind of like what you were saying, they were touching it and saying, is this the spot?
Right.
So what we've started doing recently on investigations, we will walk through the house, okay? And we'll get, if it's a bigger place, we'll get a tour. We don't want to know the ghost history. We just want to know the different things, and we'll just kind of see if we feel anything. We will then come back together and then be like, okay, let's go walk around for a little bit.
Yeah.
And we just sort of wander around. We get back together and like, do you feel anything? And some people will be like, I think I want to go there. I want to go here. And then what I think is the most important thing is we break off for about 10 or 15 minutes. Some people do self-guided meditations. Up until recently, people go smoke. But it was just like, clear your head, because that's the one thing that we've realized. You drive 2.5 hours, you get to the location, go to dinner before, you have a lot of caffeine, you go and you spend 2 hours setting up all the equipment, then you shut off the lights and you're like, investigate. And you're like, where do we go?
So
it's
what
like,
do we do?
hit the reset button where we, I sit there and I'm like, when I get home, I've got to get these 2 checks in the mail. I've got to do this. I got a 9 o'clock. I got to do this. And then be like, let it go. Because right now I'm here because I think when you hold all that in, you're not making yourself open to having that experience. Just be like, right now I am here and I am going to make myself open to an experience, because it's kind of like what you had mentioned earlier. It's kind of like, how do you make yourself more open to it, but make yourself nicer, cooler, just more approachable.
Right.
Yeah. And I feel like, sometimes when people are like looking for something so intently too, that's almost the other side of things, where you're not going to experience anything because you're so hyper focused.
Exactly.
Where you should really just be grounded. And, I like to burn sage and herbs, and it helps me release. It helps me get kind of like, hey, anything I'm holding on to, just put that out into the universe where it's better handled, and, just be open and calm. And, anytime I've done that, I've always had an experience in a situation where I didn't expect it, where you meet somebody out of the blue that you would have never, ever expected to meet that day, and you just get your mind blown.
Yeah.
So I would imagine that paranormal research isn't any different, and that's a good approach. Nobody's really doing that. I don't think so.
And I see a lot of people that are doing almost the complete opposite where they're being very aggressive, and it's they're being negative, and it's like, well, you're going to draw in that negative energy then.
Right. Bigfoot hunters. I mean, we met, oh gosh, I can't remember her name. This woman, she used to work with dolphins and stuff, and she got invited out to Oklahoma where they're having all these family of Sasquatch, these encounters.
Wow.
And they invited her out there, and she's just really chill, very relaxed, and they would have them all circle around a campfire, and they would just sit calm. Mm-hmm. And until everyone in that circle was calm, nothing would happen. Then this family of Squatches would slowly start coming in and make themselves known. And the one night, one peeked their head in the door of the RV when she was getting ready to lay down, and it was she said it was a female, and just kind of peek her head in there, and just like, oh, you're right there. And because the way they go about it, like you're with your investigations, is they're not out there in the woods banging on trees and making hoops and hollers. Like, let's sit quietly and see what can come to us. Man, you would get along with our friend Jessica Jones, the cryptid hunter. She was in here earlier. Her first couple Bigfoot hunts, they used her as bait, just like James. Mm-hmm. And she talks about, and they've done work with portals too.
Really?
She's done some interesting work with portals. They do, she's focused in remote viewing.
Okay.
And so has been kind of trained and working in that space and doing different types of paranormal research across the span, but does cryptid research as well. And she's very interesting. But it just made me think of that when you said you used yourself as bait.
I'm always willing to be the bait.
I know, dude. I love that about people, because I'm like, James, you go ahead and be the bait. I'm gonna be way over here, dude.
Yeah, I'm gonna be in the studio.
I just always heard so many stories on paranormal investigations where like people aren't ready for what could be there. Like you hear about demonic hauntings where it's not connected to the home, and that entity or whatever can latch itself onto you, and then next thing you know, you got all this scratching in the walls is kind of a typical. Mm-hmm. You hear that there's just really odd things, and it kind of starts slowly. Have you had any or heard any stories or had any experience with what could be considered a demonic haunting?
Not really demonic. I am certainly what I would call like negative energy, but I kind of approach it a little differently in that I think if you were a jackhole when you were alive, your ghost is going to be. Mm-hmm. Or the other example that I also think that a lot of ghost activity gets attributed to being negative just based on the fact that things are flying across the room, but I look at it from the angle of, I always call it like the Beetlejuice effect, because because I love the movie, but it's when, hopefully it's not a spoiler alert, but when they die and they can't get the people out of the house,
right?
And they're doing all this stuff, and they kept their social worker keeps telling them, "Did you read the handbook?"
Yeah.
And they were like, no, because it reads like stereo instructions. But they're like, read the handbook. If you want to do it, you got to read. If I were to pass away, hopefully not tonight, but if I were, I have not read the handbook, I would not know how to communicate with the living. Mm-hmm. And so I would do whatever it took. And I think I try to look at ghost activity as being almost childlike, because if you look at a little child and wants to get your attention, it's going to call your name. Mm-hmm. If that doesn't work, it's going to be trying to pull on your clothes.
Right.
Says, look at me, look at me. If it don't, it's going to start throwing things around.
Right.
It's kind of like what ghost activity is.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like so when we have people report that kind of activity, the first thing we do is we sit down and we introduce ourselves and we say, we're listening. And I openly say, I don't know if I can help you, but I'd like to if I can.
Well, man, you're starting off on the right foot. right away.
Well, yeah.
You know?
Why would you immediately go to if it's something
Come get me.
negative, right?
Yeah.
And why would you go in and challenge something? The other example that I give, and I've been doing this enough that I think my dad's ghost is okay with it if my dad's ghost is around. But when my sisters and I, when my father passed away, my mom had passed away a few years prior. When my dad passed away, it was in the only house that my parents ever owned. They had it built. I was born and raised there. My sisters all lived there. We were fixing it up to sell it because at that point we were all married. We were in different states. We didn't need the house. And at the very end, my sisters and I, we sat down and we did like a little cleansing thing. And then we basically said, Dad, if you're still here, we love this house, but it's time for someone else to love it, you know?
Wow.
And then we left. And I always say that if my dad's ghost was still there, heaven help the people who moved in there if they didn't keep the TV remote on the left-hand side of the recliner and keep the TV on ESPN2 between the hours of 4:30 and 10 p.m. because they would think it was the Amityville Horror House because the remote would fly around,
Right.
the TV would change channels, all this stuff. Is it because my dad was evil? I guess you could make that case, but no.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just that when he was alive, that's how you do things. And
Yeah.
if you don't do things in my house the way I always did,
Yeah.
I'm going to change it.
Yep.
So I think people going in to go after negative things and demonic and stuff makes
Yeah.
for good TV, but it's
Yeah.
not reality because
Yeah.
I always look at it from the angle of it because people like, do you ever wonder like, you know, that like something demonic is going to try to possess you? And I'm like,
Yeah.
if the devil really was going to try to like take over the world or do something, he doesn't need to possess people.
Yeah.
He could just take the day off. We're beating each other up on our own. We don't
Yeah,
need his
right.
help. And on top of that, why would he pick me?
Yeah.
Go after somebody bigger and more important. So
Yeah.
I don't. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I've just
Yeah.
never encountered it. And I don't know if it's because I always say, what I'm hearing is some negative stuff. Why are you doing that? Are you just trying to get attention? What is? And
Yeah.
we tend to get more results that way when we, because again, if
They
somebody
just
goes,
might not know how to be a ghost.
and how
you
to
know,
interact.
and
Because
how to interact,
if you
right.
think about, and I think that's why even some of the EVPs come across jumbled. They come across where you hear like screaming, where you hear yelling.
Yeah.
Is it evil? Well, why do you think it's evil? Because
Trying to
it's
get
yelling.
attention.
Maybe you just can't get. Because
It's like Austin Powers after he's been unfrozen, he can't control the volume of his voice. Like,
Yes.
you know, people with no inside voice.
or even if we were
Or
suddenly
my
ghosts.
kid is upstairs with her headphones on, and I'm trying to
Screaming.
yell at her upstairs, you know, from downstairs.
And people-
hey, get down here!
And the
Silence.
flip side of
Yeah.
that is what you hear all the time, because I'm always talking to people who are like, well, I see ghosts everywhere. And I'm like, well, I'm pissed off and jealous. How does that work? And they will all tell you that at one point, one showed up and then they all started showing up.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me, because if we were ghosts right now and this room was filled with, you know, the living,
Yeah.
and we were like yelling at that guy in the corner, nothing. And then all of a sudden you were like, hey, guys, that girl over there, she can see us. We're going to go over there.
Yeah.
Sure.
And we're going to be drawn to that
Yeah.
person and want to hang around them. So I think there's
That makes sense.
something to
Right.
that.
Totally.
And again,
makes
I could-
sense.
I could just be making all this crap up because, again, I don't have the answers.
But you know what?
No,
you
but that's
really
a pretty valid theory.
spurred something in me, and something I've always thought about was the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the
Yes.
Egyptian Book of the Dead. It's these guidelines on how to get to the other side, essentially. Here in Ohio, they practice the pathway of the souls. It's something, you know, Dr. William Romaine has written and researched and extensively. Is, you know, Serpent Mound could have been essentially like a machine of some sort, where it's this consciousness shifting, or this place where, you know, it's connected to where you have certain steps to take in the afterlife to get to where your soul or your spirit, or, we don't really have anything like that. Our culture, we don't, you don't prepare for death in that way. You have your friends and family around you if you're lucky when you pass away. I guess the Catholics have the death rites, the very last sacrament. We grew up Catholic, and that's your kind of your sacrament at the end. But it's very, very interesting that maybe that's why there's so much paranormal activity, is because it's just not built into our culture to guide a spirit to the other side.
I think there's definitely something to that. I also think there's something to, for better or worse, what these ghost shows are doing is that our ancestors and the people who have passed, they're not revered anymore. They're playthings now. They're things that are done. They're these, they're going to get us, but we're going to do battle. I mean, let's be honest. The way that ghost hunt and a lot of the other paranormal communities right now is, it's like you see the pictures of them and you're like, are you a hair metal band or are you a ghost hunting group? Because you've all got the matching shirts, you've got this going on, and it's like, we're not rock stars here.
Yeah.
We are actually looking for answers. And if you want to be that rock star running around, that's fine, but you're not respecting the dead.
Yeah.
And that's something that other cultures do. It's like, it's that they have passed on, but that is something to be revered. You look at even like when they're like, ooh, Day of the Dead, that's spooky. Well, not really. That's not what that is for. It's actually remembering your relatives.
Just
going back
because
to what I said, they don't want to be forgotten. Treat them with respect.
Yeah.
Sure.
And it's just because of the skeleton iconography, the Day of the Dead, some of that stuff, it has nothing to do with that.
It's a misinterpretation.
You're lighting
We're always afraid
candle.
of what you don't understand.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, you're just you're setting up food, you're lighting candles, we do a version of it at our house. When I kind of discovered my history, my background a few years back. Every year we do a thing for the Day of the Dead for my mother and my wife's aunt, and we put up pictures and we light a candle, and it really is just like, hey, we're still here, we're still thinking about you.
Exactly.
We love you, and wherever you're at, I mean, if my mom came to me in the house, it's like, that would be amazing. I wouldn't be afraid.
Right.
I wouldn't be freaked out. But I don't think my mother's a ghost, because I think she actually moved on to the next plane. Now, can she come back and visit me in dreams? And yeah, that's happened for sure. I've had, I've never told this story, but maybe I should tell it on air. So we did a virtual event, a live stream with Ross Hamilton, the Serpent Mound researcher, archaeoastronomer, author, and went to his house and actually interviewed him for this event that Tom and Terry, we kind of co-produced it with the Serpent Mound Star Knowledge folks. Yeah. And it was me, our buddy Sam, and Stoner, and very stripped down skeleton crew. And we're in the house just setting up mics, setting up the cameras, hanging out, and had a great shoot, and, hung out with Ross. It was an amazing day. And that was on the winter solstice. It was a winter solstice event. And then on Christmas Eve, I get a voicemail from Ross. And he says, hey, Mike, I hope you're having a good Christmas. But, I just had to give you a call. I just can't shake this, something that happened that day when you guys were over and filming. But, who was that woman with your crew? And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. There was just me, Sam, and Stoner. That's it. He's like, no, there's this woman. She had a lot of light around her, and she was just looking at you, and she was smiling and shaking her head. And boy, she was really proud of you. I'm like, oh my God, I'm getting chills right now. And Ross is just, he doesn't have any reason to call and make this up.
Right.
He's a pretty tuned in guy. And I said, dude, I don't know. I think you met my mom. And he's like, well, that really makes sense. So you're telling me there was nobody else? There wasn't a woman with you? I'm like, no, not at all. But she just was looking at me and looking at you, and she was so happy for you. And I was like, well, she probably realized one of my dreams is to meet you and interview you. And she knew that I was, had been reading your material, I'm sure, and obsessed with all the topics you are. And I talked to Ross about it. I think it was last summer, and he's like, "Oh yeah. That's what I experienced. That's what I saw."
Wow.
And so I didn't see it. I didn't experience it, but having him reflect that back to me, and on Christmas Eve, she actually
Right.
died on Christmas Day.
Oh, wow.
So that her death day is because I visited her on Christmas Eve, and then she passed away the next day, like in the morning after I had driven back to Columbus. So it was like all these, it's just, what is going on? That's so wild.
It's cool, though.
But yeah, just I don't think I've ever talked about it on the show, but I was kind of, it hit me as, can spirits come and go? Some of them are stuck in loops.
Right.
It seems like, some of them appear in maybe like a mist or.
Right.
And there's so many different ways, and no one experience is ever the same.
You're exactly right. And again, how does that work? I don't know. But it does.
It's fun to think
about. It does
about.
happen. Yeah. I mean, you even go down to the fact where you're like, okay, well, how come ghosts are showing up with their clothes on?
Yeah.
Why aren't they just all skeletons or something? And you're like, I don't know. In some regards, you could say, well, you're actually just seeing like an imprint from the past. You're seeing almost like a loop.
Yeah.
But if it's interacting with you, well, does that mean that it's
Conscious.
right? And then that opens up a whole other
Right.
can of just like, how does that work?
And that's
Right.
what keeps you going.
I love that stuff. I mean, it makes me giggle on these shows where they're like, is anyone here? And they hear a knock and they're like, okay, ghost, moving on. I'm the one who wants to keep
Dig into
digging.
that. Right.
Yeah, like, why are you knocking? And why is it, and it's going back to the Defiance Library where we had like the tapping along. Well, who is that?
Yeah.
And when we go back, we play the same songs, but then we also play different songs. And it's, okay, we didn't get anything this time. Well, was it time to the time of the year? Was it tied to the weather? I mean, when you talk about EMF fields and electricity, well, if you've got a lightning storm, you've got electricity, dark and stormy night. Is there something to that? The time of year?
Right.
Or is there
full moon?
Yeah. Like, how does that, and those are, I think until we really get down to that in terms of like research, there's just going to be these unanswered questions, but that's what keeps me going. I mean, most of the time we review all of this evidence and there's nothing there.
Yeah.
And you're like, I really want there to be, but there's not. But let's go back and hit it again and see what's going on. Like going back to those audio doppelgangers, when we first realized there was something there, we were like, crap, we have got decades of audio. Was there something else in there?
Oh, that's the needle in a haystack you can't even unpack
How much
afterwards.
time you got to sit there with cans on, like, for hours?
Yeah, but you
and
wouldn't be able to
hours.
know if it was you or not. You'd have to have video too to corroborate where you're around the microphone.
Exactly.
So it's
And-
like it's
And it
gone.
was just that perfect storm where there was a mix-up, and Mark and I ended up just separately reviewing that because I had marked it as being me.
Yes.
That's really interesting to figure out how you come up with some of
So
those
you thought
refining
you had made a
points as you
mistake.
go through it.
Yeah.
What you figure out as trial and error. But man, that's a big troubleshooting curve to learn after doing probably hundreds of hours of audio record.
And like I said, it's like, I don't know. I can't bring myself to go back. We archive it all, but I'm like, I don't think so.
Well,
We'll find new stuff.
that was bad.
Man. That's amazing.
That's awesome.
Gosh, dude, you blew my mind on this one.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. It gives me something to look forward to.
Yeah,
there's just more and more to come.
What's fun about these is we go through and we make cool clips and reels for Instagram and YouTube Shorts and TikTok.
Nice.
And we get to go through and we get to sit with the episode and we get to go through the sound bites and
it
I can
apart.
already tell you there's not going to be any like holding back on revisiting this episode because we get lost in the moment. And so I'm like,
You forget what you talked about.
yeah, our buddy Necro Mechanimal in there, he actually reminds me of the episodes because when he does the episode art after the episode's done, I'm like, oh my God, I totally
Nice.
forgot about that. We talked about this or that. So it's always a good refresher you know, to relive it. So I'm already super excited for, you know, just number one, to get you in contact with some people that we've been in contact with.
Definitely.
You know, we have camera gear. You know, we have some equipment, obviously. You know, if you guys ever needed a hand, always feel free to reach out to us.
Love it, yeah.
In any way, shape, or form.
Yeah,
we've
I'd do a ghost hunt.
I would. I mean, with
I would
James,
do a ghost hunt at
I've been
Tom
fighting these guys, Burton from
and,
Local Legends and
well-
all that. Come on, Mikey, let's go. We're going on a paranormal. I'm like, bro, I don't know, but I would feel.
I don't know if I'm going to Cemetery X yet.
Well, James goes.
Maybe.
But see, I do that.
It'll be
I have to
debate.
tell you, which is the one rule among the Ghosts of Ohio members and stuff, is that if you ever see me run, just run. I always joke and say it's probably a bear, but I've never.
Hey, it's a good reason to
I've
run.
never run, but if you
Yeah.
ever on investigation with me, so keep that in mind. If you see me run, just run.
That'd be a hell of a paranormal investigation. You're up in, you know, bear country and you're like, is that a ghost? Oh God, go.
That was
Bear.
when I was out doing on these Bigfoot hunts. I'm sorry, we were squatching.
Yeah.
And we're in the middle of nowhere. It's the middle of the night, and these guys are like, "You hear that? It's a squatch." And I'm like, you know, and they're digging for their guns, and I'm like, I don't know if it's a squatch, but it sounds like whatever it is could eat me. So I'm not really comfortable right now.
Right.
It might have rabies or something, you know. And I'm like,
Dude, or
Nope.
it's a human being with a
Yes.
gun that's unstable, or
Yeah.
somebody that you don't want to run into.
Be a
You know,
little
it could be a
unsettling.
prisoner running from a prison break or whatever. Somebody had asked in the chat, have you ever heard of come in contact with stories or come across anyone that's encountered gnomes or fairies, these spirit? It's been a lot lately on the internet, and they could be all completely bogus, but you know, you have the Ireland and Scotland and these legends of fairies. Have you come across anybody that's encountered or?
not that I know of. I've had investigations where at the locations they've actually left things out for the fae.
Right.
But not that that was the reason we were out there.
Yeah.
So I've seen things along those lines.
Yeah.
And I've also come across small ghosts, but I don't know whether or not that's whether they were just little or whether or not that would fall into like sort of the gnome
Yeah.
category or something like that. But that it just popped in my head. There was one case that we didn't get to go up to do, and I so wanted to do it, is because it was an old fraternity house, and they kept reporting. We went out, we met them, and they kept saying that the house was getting ready to get tore down. So we had to move like really. So we went out there, we met with them, and the weird thing is that they said it was the ghost of a man, but it would run across the living room on his knees. And we were like, that's just the weirdest thing. And so we thought fraternity house are kind of just making things up and stuff. And so it never got around to us doing an actual investigation. And at that point, we were just like, yeah, it's just a frat house. You know, they're just like
Right.
pulling our legs, no pun intended. But
Yeah.
but then years later, the building had been knocked down. And I was just digging through something and came across the fact that that was not the original house. And that when they had gone in, it was the original house, but they had remodeled the whole inside of it. And part of the remodeling was that they raised the floor a couple of feet. And I was like, oh my God, were they actually seeing the whole ghost, but it was running across the old floor?
What?
And I'm like, I want to go back because
Right.
I want to see if we go down in the basement. Do we just see feet running
That's
across?
wild.
But the house was gone at that point. But I was
Right.
like, those are the things where I'm like, I don't know why I didn't dig. I'm guilty of dismissing it out of hand where I'm like, that's just too weird.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
too weird of a story. And those are one of the cases that I'm kicking myself
Yeah.
with.
I bet, dude.
Yeah, there was
regrets.
there was another case that we never did because the homeowners didn't want us to come back. And it was because when we got there, we thought we were doing an interview, a preliminary interview with the homeowners about there being a ghost in the house. And we showed up, it's going back a few years, and clearly it was the night after a bachelorette party, complete with that they, you know, it was all the smell of all the fried foods that they had had for breakfast. So they clearly just wanted me to kind of like show them all the ghost hunting equipment that we use. So it was less of a interview and more of a show and tell. And I was a little annoyed. But while we were doing it, several of the ghost members just were walking around just taking baseline readings. And they didn't hear the conversations that I was having with the group of women. And I didn't know what they were doing. But when we left, I was kind of like, it's ridiculous. I can't believe I had to do that. It's just, you know.
Right.
And they said, well, what did they tell you about the ghost? And I was like, you know what? I don't even know. It was just some ridiculous thing about a chair in the kitchen where a ghost sits and stuff. And they were like, was it at the little dinette set? And I was like, yeah, I think so. And they were like, we got huge EMF spikes off one chair and there was nobody on it, and it was only on the top. And I was like, no, you didn't. They were like, we did. And they had taken pictures and stuff. And
Oh, wow.
we never got to go back to go to that one. And that was...
Well, I'm going to remember to keep you on my radar. Anything I hear of haunted, paranormal, I mean, my wife's childhood home is haunted, apparently, but I don't know how to...
His wife's got some...
Yeah, I go to bed early there.
What we
apparitions.
do is when we come out, as I said, we do not make any of the stuff public. We do, if we do get something, and it's to the point where I'm like, I would like to include this in one of my presentations or to talk about it.
Yeah.
We don't mention names, addresses.
Yeah.
If it's a video or a photo or something,
Yeah.
there's nothing in it where anybody could look at it and say, oh, I know what that house is.
Right.
And we tend to get a lot of good stuff that way. But what we will do is we will have people actually look at the property, look at the address, see if anything happened there. We'll actually almost create like a mini family tree of the former residents, the former owners, trace the property back and see if anything could have happened there. We'll then look at the entire area and be like, are there fault lines? Is there something there that could be not necessarily ghostly, but that could be
Energy.
doing something that could be appearing? And we give that all to the owner.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we come across things where they think it's the ghost of... There was a famous case that we did, famous within the Ghosts of Ohio, we did a investigation of a private residence that they believed there had been a fire there prior to them moving in and buying the house even. And they didn't know much about it. But they said that they would hear like yelling and screaming and all. Well, we went and we did the research and we found that there had been a fire in the house. It was a husband and wife and I believe 2 children. The fire had started in the basement. The husband wasn't home. The wife died in the fire, but she had actually gone up to wake the kids up. They were very small and had actually thrown the kids out the window to people down below. And they survived. The wife unfortunately perished. And then even more tragic, the husband was arrested and convicted of setting fire to the entire house.
Damn.
Oh, Jesus.
So we did...
M. Night Shyamalan twist.
We did an investigation, and I've since gotten in trouble for doing this and haven't done this for decades, is I picked the anniversary of the night of the fire.
Oh, wow.
But I didn't tell the Ghosts of Ohio members.
Oh.
Oh, wow.
But I was polite in that around the time the fire started, we had the records. I went down into the basement where the fire started, and I'm down there, and I start hearing these crackling noises, whistling noises and stuff, and I'm all alone. And the funny thing is, a member who's no longer in the group anymore, they had their walkie on. And so I hear the girl that's with him going, "Are you hearing that? It sounds like somebody's making tea or something." And the guy is freaking out. But his mic's open, and he's like, "Nobody's making tea. Nobody's down there." And they're like, "Jim's down there. We should go down there." And he's like, I ain't moving. So we hear all of these things. When we showed it to the new owners, they were like, "Well, what do you think it is?" And we were like, I don't know, because I didn't. But I said, we have done the research, and we laid out everything that had happened, and we said the wife who had perished, she is 2 miles down the road in the cemetery. She's all by herself. You know what? Why don't you go down there as a family and leave her some flowers? And they did. Nothing ever happened since.
Wow. See, you hear things like that.
Now, can I tell you that
Yeah.
that's what stopped? No, I have no evidence, but
Right.
but I
Draw
think
conclusions
Paying
from data.
tribute.
she didn't want to be forgotten.
I get
Right.
you. That's
Hey,
cool.
That's what Dies des Muertos is.
Forget me not.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Because the kids ended up going with her family, but they moved after all that, and he went to jail. So she is buried out there all by herself. And we still remain in contact with them, and every so often that became a thing.
That's cool.
Every year, though, it was a family thing. They'd go out there and just kind of say hi and leave flowers. And I'm like, sometimes that's all it takes. You know?
Yeah.
Yep.
And yeah, anytime I'm home, I always drop by my mom's grave. Just, leave a little something. The girls say a little something, and, we drive on back to Columbus. But, that's all it can take is just a gesture. And who knows? Like you said, I don't know if that was the reason or not.
If it works for the living, why wouldn't it work for the dead,
It's a good,
Exactly,
good
man.
point.
One last topic question. The Moonville Tunnel.
Yes.
What do you know about it?
I've been going there since 2000. I know that half of the stories there's absolutely no truth to.
Yeah.
The story about I think he was considered a brakeman who was having an affair with the engineer's, I don't know if you've heard that version, the engineer's wife. And the engineer found out but didn't say anything. And as I say this, I know the logistics of this are damn near impossible, but this is as the story goes, that the engineer said, "Say, I think there's something stuck under the wheel. Can you look?" And the guy did, and he ran over his head, and that's why the guy's headless out there.
Jeez,
There's
no.
the logistics of getting a train from a full stop up
yeah.
and running. If the guy really did get
To
his
then
head knocked
start it.
off like that, he kind of deserved it. If he was, I have been in that tunnel. The tunnel now kind of makes me sad because when I first went out there,
Where is it exactly?
it is, if you find your way to the Lake Hope furnace, you can actually
Yeah.
find your way.
Okay.
Yeah. I can give you directions
just
now
there last
because
spring.
they've now kind of made it into, originally when I first started going out there, that you had to go out into the woods, park on the side of the road, and then you kind of had to like jump over the creek. The crick.
Yeah.
And then scamper up there to find it. Mm-hmm. There is now a bridge in there. It's a I don't know if it's technically a bike trail. A lot of horses go through there and stuff,
Yep.
so it's very easy
Yep.
to actually find. It did give off a weird vibe, but I haven't found anything in the historical records as to why somebody would be out haunting that area.
Yeah.
As I said, when I first started going there in the early 2000s, there was none of the graffiti that was up there now. And it's gotten so bad that they've actually graffitied over the metal plaque that talks about it. The tunnel does have a slight bend to it, which I think gave rise to the idea that trains kept falling off the tracks there and stuff like that. I have been up to the cemetery, which a lot of people don't go to. But if you continue up the path, it's really hard to get up there. But I got up there in a CRV because it's like a twisty dirt road, and up at the top is the cemetery. Gotten some sad feelings, which I think could be the idea that it's a cemetery, so it's a cemetery that has been horribly desecrated, which I think could add to the sadness there, or some ticked off ghosts that aren't negative. They're just like final resting place. What part of that don't you understand? So,
Yeah,
Right.
sure.
Final.
so I've gotten some weird vibes off of that, but it's a neat place to visit. It's kind of lost a little bit of its
Whole Lake
allure.
Hope area is so cool.
The furnace is fascinating. If you haven't been to the furnace itself,
Yeah,
that was,
me and my family went.
and that story has changed over the years. But again, early 2000s, the version that I had heard, which made for a lot of cool legend tripping, was that it was I think he was a guard, or he was basically at the top of the furnace during a lightning storm, and that lightning struck nearby. The furnace was fully on. He slipped and he fell in there.
Oh, God.
And so the story is that I haven't found any records of that. But why ruin a good ghost story?
Yeah.
That if you go out there during a rainstorm, and so it's perfect. It's got a little parking lot. You can just park there. You just sit in your car. That when the lightning hits, you'll see his shadow.
It's a crybaby bridge situation, maybe.
It's a little bit like that. It's very similar to Dayton's Patterson Tower, Frankenstein's castle and stuff.
yeah.
It's the same damn story. Although with the legend was that a boy and a girl. It's a big. It's like a giant multi-story turret is what it looks like, all the way down to it almost looks like like a castle from a chess piece, totally up at the top. It's a lookout tower. The story is that during a horrible storm, a teenage couple ran in there to get out of the elements. The tower was hit, kind of like Tower of Terror in Disney, and they were electrocuted.
Oh.
And that if you go there during the rainstorm, you will actually see their shadows up on there. They also said that supposedly when the bodies were found, the outline of their bodies were like, soot or etched on the thing, and that's the reason why it's boarded up. It is boarded up. But the really cool thing about the story is that the lightning strike really did happen to a couple. I covered it in Central Ohio Legends and Lore, where people want the full story. I didn't name them, but it was they didn't drive out there. They were actually just sort of hiking, and the lightning storm came up, so they did run into the tower. Going up around the inside of the tower, it's a big spiral staircase that in the wall, going all the way up, metal. It's a metal railing. The girl was leading the way. The boy was behind. Lightning hit the top. It traveled down the rail, hit them both. A park ranger who was actually just making the rounds tragically heard moans coming from inside and went to.
God.
She died. The boy did survive. And they think that he only survived because she bore the brunt of it.
Oh,
There were no
tragic.
scorch marks or anything like that, but that story is true. However, the ghost story is that you see them both up there.
Wow.
I think he is still alive, but he didn't die in it. So you're like, but was that the kernel of truth, though?
Yeah.
Jeez,
But I was fascinated because you hear the story and you're like, come on, hitting the tower. Like I said, it's out of the Disney, the Tower of Terror. It gets hit on a Halloween night, and you're like, this story's not true, but that part of the story is indeed
stranger
true.
than fiction. Most
Exactly.
times.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah, that's a good one.
So many stories, man. Wow.
Well, now that I know what hallway to come down, you can always have it back.
Yeah.
Oh my God, the maze. Yeah, like I said, it's good. It's good when we have guests. Having everybody and their brother coming down that hall. It's just a dream. We're so secluded and hidden back here.
Yeah. It works out.
We love it, but we get when people try to come and visit, that's where it gets a little confusing. But, dude, this has been amazing.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's been a
lot of
blast.
fun.
I loved it.
Really, really appreciate you doing this and coming and hanging out in studio.
Yeah.
You know, anytime we get an in studio guest, it's amazing. This for sure. I mean, this has been
We covered so much
an
ground.
all-time top episode.
Yeah.
100%.
Covered so much ground.
I mean, I couldn't have asked for this to have gone any better, to be quite honest. And you know, we can start wrapping this up. One thing I kind of want to let our listeners know where they can find you. You know, if there's we've got the strangeandspookyworld.com. And then if you want to talk about your paranormal research group
Sure, yeah.
and that website and some of those things.
Yeah, ghostofohio.org is the ghost organization. Strange and Spooky World is all the rest of the crap. So you'll get just ghosts if you go to Ghosts of Ohio, and if people want an investigation or just want to read up on us, that's all at ghostofohio.org. I tell people that we also have a free newsletter that we put out every other month that you can sign up for. It's got
cool.
everything from ghost stories to equipment reviews to book and movie reviews. And if you go to ghostofohio.org, not only can you sign up for it, but there's 20 years of newsletters that are free, that are just sitting out there, which
That's amazing.
Which you can, we're working on trying to do a search engine within them, but they're all downloadable PDFs, which are everything from even like getting all fancy ghost hunting equipment and breaking it open and then saying, oh, this is what it actually really does do. So,
Oh, cool. Nuts and bolts.
yeah, so it's all up there. The easiest way to find anything about me is if you Google Weird Willis, you will find my books and me. And I want people to do that simply because when I was a little kid looking for the ghosts and stuff like that, I had the elementary school kids would call me Weird Willis to make fun out of me. So now I want people to Google Weird Willis because
proudly,
you get me.
That's right,
Yeah.
dude.
So
Hell
it's
yeah.
like, keep me up at the top of the search engine.
Wear
But yeah,
that with
I
honor.
turned being weird into a career. So
That's awesome. That's awesome.
That's awesome. I mean,
Lean into it.
you turned your passion into something you can do every day.
and I don't know how that actually happened because it started with even the writing. I just had to get the stories out of my head. So normally I was just rambling and telling people, I was like, hey man, I got to tell you about this.
Yeah.
And I turned it into a career that I'm fully blessed that I can now, with my daughter, it's like, hey, you want to go see something weird?
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
You know, like the Temple of Tolerance, you know? It's like,
Yeah,
hey,
yeah.
you got to go see this, you know?
Yeah, I take my kids
That's
there. I
great.
take them to mounds and earthworks, and it's fun. Yeah, you get to, inform the next
Spread the love,
generation.
yeah. Word of
Spread the
mouth.
love. I mean, it's.
We tell everybody about places we go to. We're like, you got to go see this. You know,
yeah,
every
yeah.
time.
There is nothing in the world that compares to the fact that you go your whole life hearing these stories about things, and then one day you turn a corner and you're like, it does exist. That's really, I've only read
Yeah.
about it in books.
Yeah.
And there are so many of those things just floating around just Ohio. It's like
It's
you
wild.
just get off the highway and just turn a corner and there's something there that you're like, I never knew that
Yeah.
existed before.
Yeah. Or you're
It's
just
so
not paying
cool.
attention to it. Right.
Yeah, and we are
right
really,
by it.
really fortunate to be in a state where there's so much strange. I mean,
And they're proud of it because some of the other states that I covered,
people don't get it. They don't
don't-
understand.
when Weird Ohio came out, weird was still a bad word.
Yeah.
But I would be going out taking pictures because I had to take the pictures of the locations too. So I'd be out there taking pictures, and people would say, "What are you doing?" I would tell them it's a book, Weird Ohio, and they would say, "Man, if you think that's weird, you need to check this out." Now,
That's awesome.
Oh,
sometimes it
wow.
was a relative, and I'm like, "No, not that kind of weird." But Ohio is proud to be weird, and they're proud to share that.
Yeah.
Now, Indiana, which you're not that far away, when I
Yeah.
was doing Weird Indiana, even when the book came out, when I was doing book signings, okay, normally do a book signing, you got a bunch of people that show up at the beginning, talk, and then as line dies down, you can talk to people, or somebody just randomly walks up, and you're like,
Yeah.
Not in Indiana. I had to get away from the table, and then I would have my wife there. and then they would kind of come up and kind of like look at it. When I was out on the road covering the places, they were not open to, they didn't embrace the weirdness. It was a bad word. And I think that's why Ohio is so weird, because we're proud of it and we're proud to share it. We want to, like you guys, you got to go check this out. And there are other states like it. I mean, New Jersey is called Weird New Jersey for a reason, you know, and that's why they got their starts. But other states, they just don't embrace it. And like I said, when you look at it and you're like, we're not that far from Indiana, but yet it's miles away in terms of their willingness to share their stories. Now, when they shared their stories, they were some of the most twisted, dark. Their ghost stories are just miles beyond. They're just, there's a lot of disturbing a lot of their crybaby bridge stories have mutated, pun intended, to the point where there's multiple versions of a story where the person driving the car with the baby in it, the baby dies, but then there's a horrible car wreck and somehow there is a dog involved and now waiting down on the side of this road for people that want to hear the baby cry is this, depending which version you hear. The most popular one is that a woman, the mom, was in the car accident. The dog died. They never found the woman's body or the dog's head. But they're together. There is a woman with a dog's head waiting down at these crybaby bridges. And you're like, wow, who makes that up?
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
I think that just put me over the limit. Oh my God. That broke me.
But you know what, man? We do a weekly show called Strange Happenings where we do anything strange in the news.
Nice.
And it never fails. There is, like Bub always says, there's no lack of strange.
It'll never stop.
It's unreal. Every week we cover, I mean, you know, we've taken 1 week off, I think, the entire, since we rebooted in November, we've taken one Strange Happenings.
We could do one every day.
Gigs.
And you're still playing catch
and it's
up,
like, we still have links in there of stuff that never saw the light of day.
Yeah,
and
kind of like what you said.
We really
earlier.
are trying to push to, you know, hey, if you come across our show, share the link with people that are interested in this stuff.
Yeah.
Hit us up. We want to know your stories. We want to, you know, we're not a call-in show like the Confessionals or like our buddies, the Hollow Sky. They do a great show called Night Shift. I mean, you would blow their mind if you ever called into a Night Shift episode.
Oh, that'd be
Jim
a great one
you
too.
would flip those guys. And then we've got some Hollow Cult folks in here tonight, I'm sure. But you know, we're always. You know, send us links, send us anything you can.
Yeah, put
you know,
it across
we
my
want to be a
radar.
nexus of strange and weird here in Ohio, Central Ohio. So we're always, you know, hoping that we can get to a point where, you know, we have people reaching out to us like, hey, you should go check this out.
Cool.
Or, you know, talk about this on Strange Happenings or, hey, we have this hey, we need to hit up Jim. You know, we need to hit up Jim Willis and say, hey, dude, you should go check this out. And just, you know, constantly and it never runs out, man.
It never
There's
does.
no shortage of weird strangeness. And, you know, we're in, I think, the nexus, one of the nexuses of the entire country. The American Southwest, which is, you know, we've had experiences out there. It's a part of America that, you know, out there in the desert, it's a weird, there's a lot going on.
Yes.
In the American Southwest. But I mean, beyond that, Ohio is kind of it. It's one of the major nexuses in the entire country. So super blessed. I'm glad, you know, you're in the same state as us. We're going to stay in contact.
Yes, definitely.
And, you know, this was so much fun. Bub, good time?
I'm overwhelmed. I'm full. The weird buffet filled me up. I had dessert. I had appetizers.
And then,
I've got, you know, food to take home with me of weird. I mean,
got the to-go box of strange.
Yeah.
Oh my God, this has been amazing, and I want to thank you so much.
Yeah,
this has been awesome.
Really appreciate it.
You know, you can follow James and Strange and Spooky
Catch
World.
him on Twitter.
Yeah, Twitter.
James A. Willis.
And Instagram at Strange and Spooky World. Hit him up on Facebook. You know, this has been an incredible episode. And you can follow us at The Strange Road. We're on TikTok. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. The Facebook group is Strange Road Hitchhikers. So come and join. Send us some links. who knows? Maybe we'll cover something that we get people bringing us interesting stuff all the time. So
we put it in there.
Put it in the Facebook group. Who knows? We might cover it on Strange Happenings.
Yeah, broaden our horizons.
Yeah, absolutely. But you can hit us up, and I'm at Mikey Leisner on Instagram, at Bub Ranley,
at
Kyle Stonard, at Matt Disbro. Go follow us. If you like this video, please share it. And also the audio version is going to be coming out probably in like a week and a half or so. And if you're listening, please share this episode for anybody that loves weird, loves strange. And we appreciate the hell out of all you guys in the chat. Anybody that's watching now, thank you guys so very much. And continue to support us. We'll keep putting out as many strange and weird things as we possibly can.
Yeah. As always, big thanks to Stoner and Disbro.
And absolutely, Stoner and Disbro and Master Control. Am I forgetting anything?
I think that covers
you need to talk about?
I think it covers it.
Well, again, thank you guys so much. You're the best.
A blast.
And Jim, thank you, sir.
Much appreciation.
Pleasure's all mine.
All right, we're signing out, guys. Peace.
My